Good afternoon, beautiful people. It is the Sunday show on the line. Seth Andrews and a godless engineer. John, good to see you again, brother.
Yeah, good to see you too there, Seth. Really enjoyed doing the shows with you. So I can't wait to take some calls today.
See, I bring like the style, you bring the substance. Like I'm empty calories, right? So I mask a lack of substance by trying to sound like, the radio guy. And then you can bring the engineering, the analytical mind. You can construct and deconstruct. And so I'm able to stand on your shoulders, and I'm glad for that. So I'm using you today, John. Before we go to the switchboard, just FYI, if you hear a little bit of nasalness, if that's a word, I've been under the weather for about 2 weeks. I cannot shake it. John, it's funny because I took a COVID test and it came out negative. But it's funny when I'm in my circle here in Jesustown, Oklahoma, USA, where I'm surrounded by COVID conspiracists, who think it's all a scam or whatever. And I say, well, I took a COVID test. It came out negative. It's probably just a regular cold. They're like, well, it wouldn't make any difference anyway, because they're going to call it COVID because they want to force you to wear a mask and make you quarantine and take away your American freedoms. And immediately it became like this big thing. And I was just like, Jesus, give me a break for just a second. Okay, allow me to sniffle without having to worry about your conspiracy theories, which continue today. You continue to hear that kind of stuff, right? Conspiracy theories abound, not just with COVID, but the election and everything else, right?
hmm Yeah, I'm surprised they don't tell you to just cover yourself in the blood of Jesus and you'll be fine. Like, and that was like some real stuff that was going around, like in the early days of the pandemic. Like people were like, "I'm not worried about it. I'm covered in the blood of Jesus." It's like that's not normal, ma'am.
Like, Jesus is my vaccine. I forgot there was a t-shirt or something. Maybe somebody can link it
hmm
for me, but Jesus is God, I can't remember off the top of my head. Forgive me for even going there. We are going to take plenty of calls today. Theists, defend your faith, right? If you believe in a God or gods, plural, if you have good reasons for John and I to no longer disbelieve in gods, if you want to make your case or have a discussion about any of that, the phone lines are wide open. And there is a web link. Are those in the description box, Morgan or John? How do people find those? I know I see web link in description. Oh shit, it's on the screen. Captain Obvious is
Also
on the
posted in
case.
chat.
Yeah, so posted in chat. All right. You'd think I would have hosted 3 or 4 times before. But again, empty calories. John brings the substance. Are you ready for me to take the first call, sir?
Oh yeah, totally ready.
I've got Noah, who is dialing in from Egypt. Noah, are you there?
Oh, hello. I didn't think you'd take my call first. That's cool.
I'm right here.
'Cause I
John's right here.
really,
You're right here. It's a party. What do you want to talk about?
yay, because I need to go to bed in like 20 minutes. So, I'm working. First of all, thank you for taking my call. Hello, Seth. Hello, John. And
Hey.
Hello.
so I'm working on this project, exploring like the origins and the evolution of ethics and morality. And in this project, I posit that that morality is a product or an emergent property of society, right?
I'm sorry, I lost it.
So
I'm
that
sorry.
puts
It's
me
an
in the
emergent
tough
property of
situation
what, Noah?
of society. Like there is no morality if you live alone, right? You wouldn't. Nothing you can do would be deemed moral or immoral, right? We have morality because we live in society, as do other animals, and so like you see more social animals have more of like the rule of law, as it were, right? So that puts me in the difficult position of having to admit that social norms are what make things moral or immoral in that time period, right? Uh, and that like brought me to the conclusion, yeah, like we think of slavery today as something unacceptable, and we look back on these people and we think that that was something unacceptable. But to those people, like to Thomas Jefferson, was he an immoral person for having slaves when basically everybody in his class had slaves? Like, would it even be logical for a politician like him to give a speech in the morning and then go do his dishes in the afternoon, right? Because I'd love if in 100 years people would say, "Hey, it was grossly immoral to make people work and like labor for their livelihoods, right? Because like robots do everything now." But that wouldn't make now the statement that employment is immoral, from my perspective, it wouldn't make it cogent or correct, right? So, what do you think about
You've
that? Like,
cast it. Wait, you've cast a
do
really wide net here,
those
and
people
we've
a
been
pass?
so there's a lot of streamers on this
Yeah.
lightning bolt. John, I see you wanting to jump in. Go for it, brother.
Well, yeah. So sorry, I I forgot that I had muted myself. So is the gist of what you're trying to say here that we shouldn't judge like Hebrew Bible sort of morality or Hebrew Bible actions as like immoral or anything like that, because at the time these were normalized things. So like slavery at the time was normalized, so it was normal for people to own slaves, and so we shouldn't negatively judge the
we
Hebrew Bible and stuff for
we
that. Is that what you're
should
saying?
we should definitely we should definitely negatively judge religious texts because they proclaim that they were made for humans to follow for all eternity, and that like that is the final moral ground. But my question is more so for the people living at that age. I wouldn't think it'd be fair to call them immoral where they were just living in that age by the norms that their society set, right? It would be weird not to have slaves,
Okay.
is what I'm
Well,
saying.
well, so, but that's not the argument as far as slavery goes in the Bible. At least not for me. That the argument is that if the Bible, this religious text, really does represent God, and God is supposed to be the moral foundation of reality, then God should know that slavery is immoral. So the question is, why does Leviticus 25:44 through 46 exist? This isn't some kind of moral judgment on the people that were adhering to what they thought their God wanted. This is us morally judging this so-called deity for these immoral things that he has said, and these are so blatantly immoral that at any point in time in history an all-knowing God should know that. And so that's the criticism there. We're not saying, oh, Israelites were shitty because they kept slaves. We're saying, oh, God is shitty because God ordered the taking of slaves and multiple different kinds of slaves that were taken.
I perfectly
And we
agree. Yes,
can
I agree.
okay.
And like if you look at my name tag there, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any kind of God, right? But it's weird to me to label a slave owner as well, basically good or a fine person when he owned slaves. And it's weird to me to judge him by the standards of today when like he didn't know any better. So which should I do is what I'm asking.
What should you do? I
I
don't
think
understand the
the question
question.
is if we look at people who are um, less enlightened about human rights, they are products of their time and culture. Slavery is the order of the day. Everybody's doing it. It is a societal norm. Then someone may not see the immorality of it. So, do we then not call those people immoral? We see them in the context of their times and give them a little more latitude. Would that be a way to phrase it, Noah?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I myself think this is messy. I don't think it fits into an A-B category. Obviously, we see people who are the products of their time, less enlightened cultures who did not know what we know. Their societal norms were different than ours. I'm not saying that everybody who owned slaves was an evil person. I am saying, though, that they were married to some bad ideas about owning other human beings as property. So the slavery itself was immoral. Whether or not they understood it to be immoral or not, that's a question about knowledge, about education, about ignorance, about analyzing the morality of it in the context of the culture all around them. I mean, people get indoctrinated into bad ideas all the time, but as Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. So, am I going to get caught whether or not I say that Thomas Jefferson was an immoral guy because he owned slaves? Well, I think that's a reductive question. Thomas Jefferson was 1,000 different things, including being the product of his time. I think there were parts of him that were admirable and laudable and remarkable. And I think there were parts of him that were certainly not. And so this really isn't a fill in the blank simple answer. John, you got anything on that? I mean, correct me if you think I'm wrong.
I mean, no, I don't think you're wrong. I guess just as far as like my concern with like slavery and religious texts and all that go, like I don't pass any kind of moral judgments on people just doing what people did at the time. Like I think that they were not as enlightened as us as far as like human rights goes and everything like that, but I don't sit there and blame them like, oh, you should have known better. I guess where I'm mainly focused at with the topic of slavery, especially when it's concerned with like religious groups, religious texts and all that, I'm concerned with this idea that God is the one who's dictating our morals, so it's like God should know these things. And so like that's where I'm focused at. I'm focused at the implications for God rather than the implications for like um the society that existed at that time. Like I mean, that they're going to do whatever they did back then. Like that's not nothing we can change, but I mean, we understand how it's immoral now. So I
I
don't see
do,
the
I do
benefit in
tend to
trying to.
think, though, I
100%.
mean, at some point, if you
Mm.
possessed another human being, regardless of what your culture was doing, I do tend to think that you would realize that it would be wrong if it had been done to you to control somebody in that way and to use and even abuse them in that
Yeah,
way.
but
I would
they thought
like
of
to
them
think
as
that,
different, as a different breed of people.
I mean, that's
Is the thing.
problematic. Are they a product of ignorance,
Yes,
brainwashing by their culture, a thousand other things?
that's
Probably.
uh, that's that's the thing. Like my question mainly revolved around do good people like are good people capable of doing bad things simply because they don't know better? And I think you've answered that quite well.
I think you probably already
I
had an
have
answer. No, I suspect you already had a perspective on this before you called us, right?
I really didn't know because it was so confusing. Like on one hand, I'm justifying someone owning slaves, but on the other hand, they didn't know any better, right? Um, but yeah, like I have one other teeny tiny question if I have the time. I'm sorry
Yeah,
to
go
take
ahead.
up so much of your time.
No, you're good.
Sure.
So I've heard Forrest, I've heard Matt talk about this. That even if God were to show Himself to them or themselves to them, they would sooner expect that they were on a psychotic break than that being definitive proof that God exists, right? And in light of that, I would like to ask you personally, do you think your position as an atheist is falsifiable? Because I'm an atheist and I've been thinking about that a lot, and I don't want to fall into the same dogma that I was in when I was a theist. That well, nothing can convince me otherwise, even if you do everything to convince me. So, do you think your position is falsifiable?
Well, I'll begin by saying that I think I disagree with the premise of your question. Atheism is not a declarative statement other than I'm not convinced.
Hmm.
So it's not that I'm making a
Yeah.
claim that has to be tested or retested, right? You're the one making, or the theist or the deist is the one making a specific claim about something that should be testable. And if I am unconvinced, I say I simply do not believe in it. So I'm not sure that an atheist has to be falsifiable. I don't know, unless I'm missing something, John.
Well, yeah. So I would agree that atheism is not like a positive statement or a positive claim about like the existence of God. It's more about just somebody that does not believe. So it's a statement about their current mental state of just simply not being convinced of a God's existence. But I guess maybe to address the question that you asked, as far as like God appearing to me, I have to take into serious consideration the proclivity of humans to like hallucinate and how our own experiences can be manipulated by various for various reasons and everything. And so I guess my point is that um is that I would have to rule out these more naturalistic explanations for why something fantastical happened. I think that you would need to find some kind of phenomena that only happens due to God existing, or God had a direct hand in it, and you would need to be able to prove that beyond doubt, and it would have to be a better explanation than any natural explanation that does exist. I feel like this is a really high bar to set, but I mean, I feel like the primary claims of like any theistic religion that we have today has set that bar high on themselves. It's not the atheists' problem that they have set the bar high. They are the ones that have put themselves in that predicament.
But do you think you can ever be moved from atheism? Is my question. Like, do you think you can ever be convinced by like super intelligent being that knows everything? Do you think you can ever be convinced by them? And
I mean,
what
I
would,
change my
I
mind all the
mean,
time.
asking what would convince you? Yeah, asking what would convince you is a little bit like pointless. But
No,
I
it's
mean,
to
I
not.
agree.
state,
No,
Okay.
it's not. No, no. I mean, asking what would convince me is not a pointless question, Noah. Give me a good reason to believe. And honestly, a god, if we look at the gods of mythology, they weren't necessarily omniscient or omnipotent. Many had limited powers, but they were still gods. But if you were to demonstrate a deity, then should be prepared to be able to accept the evidence for said deity. Doesn't mean I follow or worship that deity. Those are other conversations. But
yeah, yeah.
I think
Worshipping
if
a
we are
deity
to be,
is another kind of word.
if we are creatures committed to finding what is true, then I think we have to be prepared to accept wherever the evidence is. I have another observation too. I always hear people talk about how their God operates in the realm beyond the natural. It is the supernatural only, therefore it is not testable. And I just think that's crazy. It's like the arguments for the soul, because even if we were talking about something that existed beyond a natural realm, it is still interacting with the natural. People say I have both a brain and a soul, and they are two separate things. Okay, fine. The soul is then supernatural. It is non physical. It is out here in the ether, but it impacts my physical brain. And I should then be able to see a point of connection between that supernatural and natural substance. So it still remains something that we should be able to examine and test and retest and vet and peer review and all that stuff. And if a God is ever demonstrated in that way, I think the honest person has to be prepared to say, okay. And then all the other questions about allegiance and worship can follow later.
I agree fully. But if I'm not taking up too much time, let me like pose this scenario at you, and I already know what Matt would think, but I would like to know what you would think. Say this guy comes up to me and says, "I'm God," and to prove that to you, you can go home, wait however many days you like, bring as many witnesses that you like, and when you decide to test it, just say, I decide to test it, and then light a fire measure its temperature, and it'll be 10 Celsius, right? And all the witnesses can see that with you, right? If I said that to Matt, he'd say, well, then I've verified that that one guy can do this one cool trick, but I have not verified that's God, right? And
I mean,
that gets
I'm
me wondering, like, how do you, yeah,
well, I'm just wondering how that would prove that he's a god. I mean, if anything, I would just think that it would just prove that maybe he's an illusionist or something like that, or there's some weird phenomena that you just don't understand there. Like what about that
no,
particular test?
he's not in the room, right? He left me be, and he said like, I will make it so the first time you light a fire in your home, after however many days you'd like, just to test that I can break the laws of physics, that fire will be cold, right?
Okay, I still this
Like
seems like
it's
a weird
not, yeah,
anecdotal to present for like proof of God. Like I mean, if he's sufficiently powerful enough and he's all knowing, then he should definitely know what would convince me. I mean, if a cold fire is the thing that would convince me, sure. I mean, we should expect that. But I mean, if a cold fire isn't going to convince me, then we should expect something better, right?
yeah. And like, what
Okay.
about if they're not all knowing and all powerful? What if they're like just capable
I,
of bending physics,
I
right?
feel like we're starting
Like,
to really wander
yeah.
in the weeds here. Again, I
No, no, it's fine.
refuse. I refuse
Hmm.
to engage in conversations where, hey, they can do anything they want, including bending the laws of physics, so that whatever they do, even if it makes no sense, makes perfect sense. I think this is sort of gets us into a regression that becomes non-helpful. But no, I do appreciate your call all the way from Egypt,
Yeah.
and you've given us and the
Thank
comment
you. Very
section something to talk about for the past 15, 20 minutes. So thank you very much.
cool. Bye.
All right. See you later.
All right. Bye.
I don't know. I feel like we were getting into, can God make a rock so heavy that he can't pick it up? And, some of that is,
Well,
well, if I was to go off and tell you about a fire, it sounds almost like what playing card am I holding in my hand? I don't know. You have thoughts,
mhm.
obviously, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like trying to posit, what kind of demonstration would prove that God exists. Like, I just don't see how that's beneficial. Like, I simply don't know what would actually prove that God exists. But like, I'm that's not me saying that I can never be swayed from my position. That's just me saying that, like, I just simply don't know what that evidence would look like. I just know that I haven't seen it yet, kind of thing. And so, like, it doesn't seem beneficial to try to posit like different things that would prove it.
we do have room on the switchboard as I speak over my rasp just a little bit. If you want to dial in, theists will get priority. So if you're a believer and you want to talk about why you are a believer, we'd love a chance to have that conversation. I hear a lot that atheists would never accept evidence for God, right? We're not listening, we're a closed system. I think some of this is a defensive posture by theists, where they say we're just closed minded, we just want to chant, we just want to hate God, or I'll hear a version of, it doesn't make any difference what I say, you'll never change your mind. And I'm always struck by that, because you're looking at somebody who changed his mind. It was, decades into my life, but I think if there's an example of anybody who can course correct and make a mindset change and accept different information and totally go off in a different direction, I would think it would be me. I mean, you would agree with that, right? You made changes to your positions based on what you learned, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's good to update your understanding of things with new information. Like, I feel like that's how you combat any kind of cognitive dissonance. There's different ways to come to deal with that, and I think that updating your worldview to incorporate new information is probably the best way to do that.
I've got Mario from New Mexico. Mario, are you with us?
Hey, how's the audio?
You sound fine.
Good.
All right. I also have to say that I have autism, at the beginning of every call because it'll come up or you know. All right. So I wanted to talk about how my I have kind of like a it gets better kind of a story because I've been an atheist for like 15 years and I was raised Christian, and when my parents found out I was an atheist, my mom cried because she thought I was going to hell because, and my dad, he found out later, and part of his reaction was like he called me, and at the time he said, he was threatening to take the car away from me because, like, quote, we're not letting no damn atheists drive our car, unquote. But that was like 15 years ago.
That happened to you, even if it has been a decade and a half. Do you have a question for either John or me, or a comment for the show beyond that?
Well, just recently I had to move back in with my parents, and like our relationship has gotten a lot better because like there was always love, it just doesn't always look like love in the moment.
So, if I'm hearing you right, the relationship has improved over the years enough that you can share a space.
Yeah.
Do you talk at all about religion, or is it just the elephant in the room?
Well, we've talked about it a lot. Like my mom, like even like as recently as this year, she was sort of expressing that she felt like a failure because she couldn't like get me to believe in God or whatever. But like she didn't get me to believe in God, but she got me to believe in love.
Okay.
Well, like because she paid my rent for the last 9 months I lived in Austin because I got injured at work, and I couldn't work for several months. And you can't put a price on love, but $8,000 is a hell of a price.
Well, it sounds like it's been a kind of a tumultuous road, but I'm glad you have at least some kind of a relationship. They're not badgering you about your non-belief, are they?
No.
Good.
Like,
Good.
I think my mom finally got it, because like I told her that, like, see, I've, like, part of what's been going on with me is that I've been learning to unmask. That's like a thing that a lot of autistic people have to go through.
Okay.
And for me, that's taken the form of like letting myself go through having meltdowns, because I only have meltdowns when there's like when bigotry is happening around me, and that's okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not a family counselor. I'm not really sure what meltdown means to you. Um, I would hope we're not talking about like a
Um,
loss of control, anything certainly violent toward yourself or anybody else, right?
well, see, when you're screaming and pounding the floor, it looks like violence to some people, but it's not. It's just screaming and pounding the floor.
All right. Anything else you want to share with us, Mario, before I move on?
Well, like, I know this is such a cliche, but like, it gets better. You know, as long as there's love, it gets better.
You've got love in your life. John, did you have anything else before I move on?
No, I didn't really have any kind of input on this particular call.
Thanks, brother, for the call. We appreciate you. Be safe over there in New Mexico, okay?
Thanks. Don't forget, our stories are all connected. You know, like, I saw you at the Unholy Trinity tour in Albuquerque 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Hard to believe it's been a decade. Well, I'm glad you were there, and I'm glad you're still around, brother. You take care of yourself, okay?
Thanks.
Yeah, the
Bye.
Unholy Trinity was a fun tour. My buddies Aron Ra and Dillahunty, I called them up and I said, "Look, what if we were to do a speaking thing where we just all three went out and we did like a tandem deal where we each gave a short presentation and then we finished on stage all together, engaging each other in the audience. And what if we called it the Unholy Trinity?" And it was just a fluke. It was a gag. And we did 3 cities in the States, and then we ended up in Australia. We did 3 cities in Australia, and people still freaking talk about that. The videos are online, but it's weird a decade later that people still bring up the Unholy Trinity. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
I
flattered by
remember
it.
when y'all did that tour.
Yeah. And we all have such distinct styles. It's weird, we've all got our own flavor. And so when you get us all together, somehow it works. Despite our differences, we all kind of play off each other pretty well. I hear a lot of calls. I get a lot of emails from people who have faced consequences from family members for their doubt, for their criticisms, for their apostasy. I've had people send me desperate emails. My parents kicked me out of the house because they won't have an atheist under their roof. I had a college student, and his parents said, "If you say the word atheist again, we're going to pull all your college funding so that you can't afford to go to school." I've had people threatened physically. You're an agent of the devil. I'm not going to have that around me or my kids. Families, parents, couples will split, and then atheism becomes part of the custody battle. One parent apparently is too evil to have custody or co custody of the kids. And I find this incredibly tragic. It's more than just then emotional blackmail, it's financial blackmail and
Mhm.
personal blackmail. You can hold someone's whole future hostage. And I know you've heard some of these types of stories as well, John.
Yeah, I have, and I typically what I'll do is I'll tell people that only if you're in kind of a safe situation where you can like sort of be out and everything that only then, would I advise anybody to like be vocal about it. Like if you're not in a safe position to like, be out and about, then I wouldn't do it. And that's always a tricky thing whenever it comes to um whenever it comes to like giving advice for people whenever they call in to something to like a show like this, because you don't want to give them like bad information that's going to get them thrown out or anything like that. And so it's always kind of a fine line, at least for me, to sort of I guess juggle.
I think an authentic life is so important, but I have
Mhm.
heard some say that those who play a longer game are cowards. Why don't you just say it out loud? You know, And I'm like, well, you're not really empathizing with what the potential consequences may be. It's situational, it's case by case. And some people they're playing the longer game for a reason. They want to I want to be
Mhm.
able to see my kids. I want to be able to finish my college education. I don't want my religious boss to fire me because I have no other way to pay the bills right now. There's so many other things that are going on, so I always feel like we need to never sacrifice our empathy and compassion when we hear stories of people who may be under the radar. I don't know. I get the
Mhm.
vibe there are a lot more non believers out there than anybody really realizes. They don't fill out
Yeah.
the polls. They don't swear it on their sleeve, but they just don't give a shit. Maybe that's just me. I don't know what your take is.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, and the clergy project is kind of an example of it. There's so many people out there that are kind of stuck in those kinds of situations that it's really hard to deny that they do exist.
We've got room on the switchboard if you would like to dial in and talk about whatever is on your mind. I can probably get you in the next 10, 12, 15 minutes, depending on what Amir brings to the
Hello.
table. Amir, welcome.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Pretty good, Amir. How you
Doing well.
doing?
I'm doing great, man. I saw you guys on like Instagram threads of all apps, and it was I saw one post, and then I kind of just scrolled past there, and my feed refreshed, and I was like, okay, if I see these guys again, then I'm definitely gonna join their live. So next week later, here we are.
Okay.
What's on your mind?
Yeah. So basically, when I see you guys, I know that it seems like you guys seem like very genuine people. Like you actually want to get to the truth. So you guys open debate for many people. You want to hear many different sides of many different theologies.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
basically from the Muslim perspective, we believe in like the Almighty Allah, God, the one true God, and His final messenger, Muhammad, peace be upon him. And essentially, what I wanted to get into was the thought of empirical evidence, and essentially, what kind of evidence would you guys use to decipher if God is true or not?
Oh, which
Uh,
God? I guess, is where do you
The
want us to
one
believe
true.
in Allah? Are we going to start there?
Yeah, essentially. But I mean, first, before we get the actual like creed of the religion, I believe that you should establish logic first before faith. That's something that our prophet endeared. So I would say to believe in one entity, the initiator, the creator of the heavens and the earth, it is important to kind of ask you guys, what do you believe is evidence? Do you have to go into like a microscope or a telescope into space and see God for yourself to like actually have that kind of proof, or does other proof work for you?
Well, so as far as proof goes, and the subject of your particular God, I would say that there's very likely no proof that could convince me that your particular God exists. I'm very gnostic when it comes to specific definitions. So, like, if you're talking about just in general, like a God existing, then I mean, we could have that conversation. But if you're making the specific claim of the Muslim God, I would say that there's nearly no evidence that could convince me that your God in particular exists.
Okay, yeah, I hear you, but I'm kind of more trying to appeal to the general idea of God before we get into the creed itself, like the actual Muslim belief. I know that you guys don't want to keep me here all day, and like you guys have other callers and stuff, but I think the most important thing is to establish the belief, or not the belief, but the evidences that we have for the one true God before we even get to Islam. Like if we leave Islam out of this for now, that would be great. But first, we should establish the logic of what evidence there is for God.
Well, if there is a God claim, that should be a testable claim, shouldn't it?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So then we would have processes to determine whether or not that God existed. What are the characteristics and attributes of that God? What are the edicts of that God? We should be able to use experimentation to be able to determine that that God exists and then determine that God's properties. I think
Mm.
experimentation probably the best word that I would use. We use the tools that we have and the reality in which we exist to test the claim. And if that God does not pass the test, the evidential test, then I think we just say, no, we do not believe in that God. And if it absolutely fails, we say we outright disbelief, which I think is what John was going for. And we talk about some of the theistic gods with a proper name. We can say, well, in the more nebulous sense, we can say, is there a watchmaker god out there, some deity floating around, whatever? But we know that the theistic gods of the specific religions of planet Earth, we can say, no, those have been disproven as mythology. I mean, experimentation would be fair, right? You should be able to test the god claim, right?
You should be. Yeah, that's part of establishing the logic, I believe.
So when
Yeah,
you provide those tests in your own life to prove Allah, you've done that? Have you done the experiments, and has Allah then been revealed in the results of those experiments?
When we say Allah has been revealed to myself, I wouldn't say that He, in His Majesty, has not shown His face to me. I have not seen the Prophet for myself. That is the essence of the faith part of it. But first, we come to establish the logic of it. When we see the fact that there is things in this planet, in this Earth, in this universe that we know for a fact exist, but we can't, use empirical evidences to like see that. We can't, like essentially the consciousness. That is a arbitrary, not arbitrary, but that is an acute thing that we can't see, touch, taste, or smell. So
I'm not sure I
we have
agree
to
with
first
that
establish.
statement. But so if I come to you, Amir, and I say, well, there is a consciousness, there are things we simply do not know or cannot explain, and that would be Yahweh, Krishna, some other deity. How would you differentiate? How would you prove one or disprove the other? And faith doesn't really
That
work for us
that
because
is,
we're all invoking faith, right?
I see what you're saying, but I also think that it's further down the argument for God when we come to the creed part. The first is to establish if there is a God, whether it's the Hindu gods who believe in multiple gods, or the Trinity, or the oneness, the Tawheed of Allah. First, we have to establish if there is many gods, they have created this heaven and the earth. If there's one God, it's created the heavens and the earth. So when we see things and we know the existence of things that are not there, and I'm not trying to adhere and tell you that the consciousness itself is God or anything unseen is God. But we have established the fact that there are things that we can't use empirical evidence to prove, but we know for a fact that they exist.
How do you
so
know for
so
a fact they
what?
exist? Oh, go ahead, John. Forgive me, brother.
No, you're fine. I was just going to ask if he could give us like a concrete example of what you're talking about here, things that are not empirically provable, but we know to exist. I'm kind of curious as to what you're talking about.
Sure. There's a few things. I would say one is definitely consciousness. We're not able to exactly prove or pinpoint
No, we can.
where consciousness
No, we
exists
can.
in
We
the
can
brain.
prove and we can pinpoint where consciousness comes from. Consciousness is an emergent property of a complex central nervous system. So that's provable that consciousness at least originates from our brains, and our consciousness, is affected by our brain chemistry and our brain structure. So, like that, we know exactly where that is. Can you name another thing that we can't empirically prove that we know to
Although
exist?
I disagree because the entire point of gray matter in the brain is to transmit electrons throughout each other and electricity in general. So I don't really know exactly where
Right,
you
and
have
that
pinpointed
complex,
consciousness.
so sorry, and that complex interaction is what produces a consciousness. That it's a complex interaction of our neurons and our brain chemistry that causes us to have a consciousness or to have like an awareness of ourselves. So that is something that's understood. We may not understand consciousness like 100% or fully or anything like that, but we don't have to in order to know that one, it exists, two, where is it located, and three, how do we explain it as a matter of the natural world? So I just simply disagree with you that consciousness is magic and that we have no evidence that consciousness exists, but we know that it exists. So is there
Yeah.
another thing that you can mention that it has no empirical evidence, but we know exists?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you respectfully. I know that you have your arguments for that, but I would say the second thing would definitely be antimatter. I mean, there's the fact that there is nothing in this universe that we know of where there is nothing. There's no such thing as nothing in this universe as we know of, even outside the
Okay.
realm of the universe's lines, the infinite lines of the universe.
I don't believe that's true either.
The entire, if there's ever voids in space where light does not exist, even in the center of black holes where light is sucked and then went through an acute singularity, those those pockets of empty, quote unquote, empty places without matter is filled with antimatter.
So hold on. Let me interrupt. Hold on, because you're saying, just so that I understand what you're talking about here, you're saying that antimatter has no empirical evidence for it, but yet we know antimatter to exist, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's patently wrong. So one, there's the positron discovery that was done by Paul Dirac in 1928, and then Carl Anderson experimentally proved it. So the prediction happened in 1928, and then science was able to experimentally prove it in 1932. With the positron, there's a cosmic ray observations. Antimatter particles such as positrons are naturally created in cosmic ray collisions. Instruments like the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer, the AMS-02 on the International Space Station, has detected positrons and antipositrons in cosmic rays, providing further evidence for antimatter particles in nature. And then there's also particle accelerators and high energy experiments. We've been able to produce antimatter in colliders. Like antimatter is routinely produced in particle accelerators, such as the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. There's also annihilation events, which is when antimatter particles are created. They're often quickly annihilated with their corresponding matter particles, producing high energy photons or gamma rays. These annihilation events are direct evidence of antimatter being produced and observed in controlled settings. And then number four piece of evidence, positron emission tomography or PET scans. So this is medical application. So these PET scans and medical imaging technique uses positrons, the antimatter counterpart of electrons. A radioactive tracer that emits positrons is ejected into the body, and then subsequent annihilation of positrons with electrons emits gamma rays. Then there's the observation of hydrogen. So anti-hydrogen creation and trapping. In 1995, scientists at CERN successfully created anti-hydrogen atoms, which consist of an antiproton and a positron. And then in 2012, they managed to trap anti-hydrogen atoms for longer periods, allowing for more detailed study. And then there was symmetry testing done on anti-hydrogen particles. So the properties of anti-hydrogen are studied to test the CPT symmetry, the charge, parity, and time symmetry, and to explore why our universe seems to contain more matter than antimatter. And then finally, there's gamma ray observations in space. So like, we have a lot of evidence for antimatter, that antimatter actually exists. And so that, again, is not something that we don't have empirical evidence for, but yet we know to exist. Can you give us another, like, whatever your third thing is?
Yeah, that's the existence of them is not the the what I'm trying to get at. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm saying the fact that they exist, but we can, and even using the scientific method and everything you've explained, the fact that you cannot see, taste, touch, or feel these things, that is proof alone that there are things in this world that
we can detect them. No, I just read off all of the different pieces of evidence where we can detect antimatter. So like, I don't know what you're talking about here. I made sure to try to steelman your position before I went on my long rant about the evidence, saying that is antimatter something that has no empirical evidence, but yet we know to exist, and you seem to respond in the affirmative. That's why I went through my entire list. So if that wasn't the point, then that's perfectly fine. What is the point of this?
The point is there's things in this world that we cannot use empirical evidence to exactly find. And the fact is, we are living in a world that is hyper-fixated on the hyper-analytical, the actual thought of imperialism.
So sorry, Amir, I'm trying to get to this. Seth, can you double check me? Like, I did ask him for, something that we don't have empirical evidence for, but yet we know to exist. And then he hasn't been able to provide one. And so now he's just repeating his unfounded claim. Is that correct? Am I following the conversation so far?
No, that is not unfounded, because you have never given a reason as to, or pinpoint exactly where even consciousness was. So you decided to move to a second thing, because you were unable
No,
to
I
tell me
pinpointed it. I
exactly
told you
where
exactly where it
it's
was and how we know
pinpointed.
that it actually is connected to a brain. And then you mentioned antimatter, which I thoroughly refuted with the several pieces of evidence that we have for antimatter. And so now I'm asking for a third thing so that you can actually substantiate your claim that you're just baselessly saying. So right now it just seems like
It's
you
not
have an
basis
unfounded
if
claim.
I'm unable to take to the one topic because we have moved on, and you're expecting a third thing when we haven't even covered the claims of the first one, which you asked me to just move on.
No, I mean I've already done it. Like
No,
I've
the
already
existence
explained it.
of
I've
electricity in the
explained all of that.
brain. No, you really haven't. The existence of electricity in the brain has not proven or pinpointed exactly where consciousness exists.
Okay,
Part of me
look.
thinks
So all I'm trying to do, go ahead, Seth. I've
no. I
rambled.
mean, I don't want to derail you if you've got something else to say. I'm still stuck over here on Allah and Muhammad and
Okay.
how that connection was made. What I'm mostly hearing is, let's just say there are things that we do not know or have not explained or have not found a way to test yet. I simply disagree with this idea that it's not testable or they exist beyond being measured in the physical world. And secondly, if there was such a thing that hinted to some, I don't know, supernatural other deity or otherwise, why the God of the Quran specifically? Because all I heard was faith. I haven't seen Muhammad. I haven't had firsthand knowledge. I can't prove it. I just know in my heart. That's what I heard. So I'm kind of stuck back on the Quran, Amir. Why
Yes.
Allah?
Okay. I think that's a beautiful question. I would say that why the Quran, why Islam, is because this is the only religion to exist to have the original scripture intact from when it was in time, when the Prophet, we say
No, it's not.
things like, yes,
No,
there
it's
is.
not.
Because
No.
yes, the Sanskrit of the Hindu Vedas of a dead language who has not been
So
able to interpret them.
Amir, let's just sure, let's throw a wild hair out there. Let's just say that you're correct about that. I don't think that you are, but let's just say that that's
Okay.
correct. What is that like? Just because it's been repeatedly copied down accurately, what does that say about the truth of reality? Like, why should we think that this has any kind of connection to like reality?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that that's basically what I was getting to is the fact that just because something has been had a chain of transmission or has survived a long time or able to you know uh, carbon date something does not necessarily make it true. Just because something is older than something else does not make it true either.
Then
The
why bring it up?
evidence is. Excuse me, one more time.
Then why bring it up? I mean, that was the first thing that you mentioned, like that the Quran has an unbroken line of transmission to where it's the original stuff that's been written down. If it has no bearing on whether or not the Quran or your faith is actually true to reality, it kind of feels like it's a pointless thing to even bring up in the conversation, especially first shot out at answering Seth's question here.
Yeah, but the difference in the Quran is written 1400 years ago. And basically, I'm not denying science all entirety, but the fact is science is not eternal. It changes over time. If something were to give proper evidences in the past 1400 years ago that withstand the test of time and have yet to be uh, contradicted or contradicted in itself, then that is also a evidence for it. Not the supreme
I
evidence
mean,
for it, but
sure,
that is
you
a
can
evidence.
you can totally twist the scripture of the Quran and try to make it sound like it had some kind of prophetic or advanced knowledge that we only discovered later. Sure. Sorry, Seth. I interjected. You were about to
You're
say something.
fine. You're fine. I just think somebody wrote some shit down and we can trace it. And I'm not convinced that we can. In fact, David Fitzgerald has a new series of books out that even questions whether or not there was a Muhammad that existed. And that's a whole other conversation. But if we look at the claims in the Quran, whether or not it was the creation of humankind, the harvesting of the blood, the spinal cord, I think, and then Muhammad rides to heaven on a winged horse. I mean, come on. The idea that this
Well,
has
if
been
you believe in a
empirically
one
proven.
God who is capable of anything, then any kind of miracle cannot be, a true prophet of God that performs miracles.
Welcome
If
to
he's a,
supernatural religions of all shapes and stripes, man. You can come at me with any specific faith,
that's how is
and I
that how
will.
is that an evidence against
I'm
this
going to
stance,
finish
though?
this sentence, Amir. You can come at me with any faith and invoke the supernatural, and that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, man. I
I
want to
did
know if
not.
it's
I did
testable.
not invoke that.
If you can
I,
prove that it
I didn't
happened,
invoke the
I'm
supernatural when
interested.
you brought up.
If you're taking it on faith or saying it's not measurable or God works in mysterious ways or it happens off here in sort of another, it's some membrane beyond the world that we live in, this is not helpful to me, and it's a claim anybody can make. Anything else before I move on?
Yeah. Where do you believe the universe came from?
I don't know.
How did the universe come to be?
I do not know. John, do you know?
Okay. Your faith is on I
so
don't.
as far as no, so first of all, I don't know is a perfectly fine response. I don't know doesn't mean that magic is automatically the default explanation and it's better than I don't know. So like you can just fuck off with that kind of thing right there.
Yeah,
But
that's why I
I
said
tend to
establish the
lean.
logic first.
Hold on. You asked the question. I'm trying to answer it. So I tend to lean more in the quantum fluctuation explanation for how our universe inflated. Now, as far as like where did it come from? Like, I don't think that it had to come from anywhere. I just think that the universe naturally inflated through natural phenomena that, we've hypothesized about how it could have happened. And there's multiple different ways in which it could have happened. So, like, are we ever going to know? No, we're not going to know. But we can have pretty good inclinations as to how it could have happened. And there's multiple different ways in which it could have. I lean in one direction. There are plenty of other scientists that lean in other directions. But the point of fact is, in all of this, is that it's not fucking magical shit. We don't think that the universe required a wizard to speak an incantation in order for the universe to come into existence, which is what the Abrahamic religions essentially claim in the very beginning of their book when they said that God spoke the universe into existence. That's an incantation. That's wizard shit. You want wizard shit? Go to Hogwarts. Don't sit there and go to a scientist with some Hogwarts shit and telling them, oh yeah, but my God spoke an incantation to create everything. What do you got? Like, that's just ridiculous shit.
Final thoughts, Amir?
Wow.
We've been with you for 20
Yeah.
minutes. I'm about to move on.
Okay, just real quick. So my analogy is that you guys, or my belief and what you guys are trying to tell me is that it's either I don't know or the universe is eternal from naturalistic means of inflating the universe.
We didn't say
Because
any
you
of
said
that.
it
I didn't say anything about
you said it
eternal. I
natural
didn't say anything.
inflation.
I'm saying we don't know what caused the singularity. We do know that the singularity is something that we have measured. We can actually measure the age of the universe. We can measure the expansion of the universe. We can understand many of the processes that have happened in the last 13.8 billion years. But what caused the
Yeah.
singularity, I don't know. John doesn't know. You don't know. And I take it on faith, even though I haven't seen the one who created all things. That doesn't really work for us. I think that's fair. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll end it on this. I want you guys to know I respect your arguments. I respect your side. I'm not trying to offend you guys. My last
I'm not offended.
kind of just go ahead here if you guys would allow it.
You
So
have
yeah,
a
essentially,
what? If we'll allow it. I'm sorry, once again.
I said if you guys will allow it. I just have one more thing to say, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so for this analogy, let's say the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, which I believe to myself, but before the Big Bang. Let's say there is nothing, and for the essence of the Big Bang itself, let's look at an analogy of a sniper. You guys have probably heard this before. Imagine a sniper has his target in his crosshairs. He's ready to fire, and he has to call in to the general to see if he can take the shot. Right? The general says, hold on. let me contact my superior. Well, and then that superior contacts his superior. And he says, hold on, I needed permission to contact an even higher superior. And it keeps going infinitely. Let's say there's an infinite chain of generals that are superior
Can
to
I
the
stop
previous.
you right here? Can I stop
Would
you
the
right
shot
here?
ever be fired?
This is
Would
a
the
false.
shot ever
This
be
is a
fired?
false analogy. This is a false analogy. Okay, and I'll explain
How
why.
so?
So you're positing that we're at the end of the universe. We're at the heat death of the universe. The heat death of the universe is about to happen. Like as soon as we get
No.
the clear to take the shot, that's the heat death of the universe. Where we're
No, that's the Big Bang.
currently at right
The
now.
shot is the Big Bang.
No, stop. So currently, right now, we are in the middle of this. So we're in the middle of this chain. You're going to have to posit that the chain simply does not exist in order to say that we can't pick out any certain moment in that chain of like requesting, permission, Gesundheit, requesting permission to take the shot, right? And so like you're saying that we can't pick at any point in that chain, like, oh, this is where it is. So just like on a number line, which I feel like is a bit more easy or is easier for people to really sort of conceptualize. Imagine a number line, and we don't know where on the number line we're at. We just know that we're at point N, right? And it extends in infinite directions on both sides, right? It goes to infinity, positive infinity, negative infinity. What you're trying to tell me right now is that we simply can't pick a number on the number line. That's what you're telling me right now. And that just doesn't make sense to me. We can totally pick out a single number, a single spot on that number line without actually knowing if there's a negative infinity going one way or if there's a positive infinity going another way. The fact is that point still exists. You're still at that point. So unless you're positing that you just simply cannot pick a point on the number line at all, then your entire argument here is moot. Like it makes no sense.
Strawman point, because essentially, so the bullet itself is what the universe is beyond the Big Bang. The shot itself is caused by an initiator, which is one of the numbers on the number line. If the numbers have no sense of agency themselves, the shot will never be fired, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, and like I said, false analogy.
Not
I don't know,
being the
Seth. He's
creation of
not
the
really
universe.
listening to us.
I appreciate you calling, Amir. We're
I
going to
think-
move on. Take care of yourself. Thank you. So many assumptions being made that the singularity would not take place unless there was an agent giving the command to initiate, and then that agent may need a command from a higher up or a higher up. There is a who, which is part of his analogy that is simply has not been demonstrated. If there was a who, I would like to know. But I think, there's a series of assumptions that are being made at the beginning of the sniper analogy that simply fall apart. So if you can't provide the correct foundation for the argument, I find the argument itself is problematic. Next up, I've got Marty from Missouri. Marty, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling. Are you there?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for calling. You're on with Seth and John. What's on your mind?
Okay, well, I tried to call, or I called last week when I talked to Jeremy Valkai, Dillahunty, and we
We
sort
have
of
a
I
bad
addressed
connection, my friend. I can't hear you. Say it again.
bad connection.
Yeah, say it. I'm sorry. Start your call from the top. You called when and spoke to who? Is Marty on the road, perhaps? Between
Marty, your
self-
phone may have gone to sleep.
Morgan, what's the move here? Does Marty have to wake his phone up, or do I put him back on hold, or have him call back?
I put
What
him
do you
back in the
recommend?
queue.
Let's try Chris from Tennessee. Chris, thanks for calling.
Hey guys,
Welcome.
how's it going?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. I was calling because I've always considered myself an atheist, but I've been watching the show a little bit for a couple of months now, and basically everybody seems to define atheist as I haven't seen proof of God or whatever, and it's not like I'm like way beyond that. There is no God. to me, anybody believing in God of any kind, by any definition of any religion, is just a joke. I mean, they're living. I don't know.
I'm
It's like
no,
Lord
I
of the
mean, I
Rings
don't
and
know.
shit
I
like
wouldn't
that.
say no. I wouldn't. I don't know. I feel like that's going a little bit too far, saying that they are a joke. I mean, I think that they can demonstrate themselves to be a joke, like a lot of the conversations that I've had on the internet. But I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily just believing in a god makes you a joke, because
Well,
I mean,
no,
you
I
gotta.
don't. I misspoke. I misspoke. Not their belief to me is a joke. Believing in any kind of anything like that at all, because
Okay,
there's
but are you
absolutely
saying
no
that you can
evidence.
definitively are you saying that you can definitively prove that God definitely does not exist? Like any definition of God, like yeah, like even a deistic God, a
Well,
God that farted the universe out and then just fucked off. Like, can you disprove that?
I mean, there's no evidence. There's no evidence at all. At
Right.
all
There is no
anywhere.
evidence at
Uh,
all,
uh,
and
uh, uh,
that means that you know you're free to just not believe in that thing, which is what I do. I'm with you on this that there's no evidence for it, so that's why I don't believe. But that's also what characterizes me as an atheist. I'm an atheist because I just don't believe. I feel like what you're trying to say is that you've moved from an agnostic atheist position to a more gnostic atheist position, meaning that you seem to have definitive knowledge that no gods whatsoever do exist. Does that
well,
would that characterize your
none by
position?
any of the modern like major religious definitions. If you go by any
Okay,
of the modern major religious definitions, that God for sure does not exist,
okay,
because all of them require a God that's omnipotent and all powerful, and that just does not. He's not there.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Chris. I understand, and I really do get it when we say there is no God. We're saying there's no evidence that any of this magical stuff, any of the superstitions of our ancestors, any of the
Y-
claims made by all these holy books, there's absolutely no reason to buy any of it, and every reason to say it's a bunch of crap. We need to evolve our thinking past the superstitions of our ancestors and our own fears
Yeah,
and our own desire to fill blanks, and we need to just say it. There are no gods. And that is that where you fall, Chris?
yeah, man. I mean, like people. Okay, I live in southeastern Tennessee. I mean, I actually live in a town that's a fairly small town and used to be the headquarters for three major religions, or I mean, three major Christian churches. And I'm surrounded by all these people who believe in all this stuff. And by age 10, I realized that the Bible made no sense. Mathematically, none of it made sense, and the stories were just impossible. And it was just a joke to me. It just became a joke. But I mean, I've always tried to be kind of sensitive to these people around me. I don't know, they're superstition, and like. But at this point in my life, I'm getting to where it's just hard to even. I literally laugh in their face at times. Just cackle like the Joker when they start trying to talk to me about this stuff. Most of the people
Well,
in my social group, they know me. They know how I am. They don't try it. But you
I
run
have a
into
couple of
people and
thoughts, if I can, Chris. The point I think, and I don't want to put too many words in John's mouth, but I think this holds true for those of us who simply say, "I don't buy it," instead of saying there are no gods. We we tend to there's we want to avoid sounding dogmatic about our position, which is what many, especially theistic or high control religions do. They come out and they make declarative statements. If we say, look, I don't buy it, I disbelieve in this, we can say we disbelieve in specific gods with proper names because they have been debunked. And if there's another deity out there somewhere, I've seen no evidence, I simply don't buy it. I do not believe. What this does is it means that we have continued to put the burden of proof on the person who is making a specific truth claim. So we're trying to stay away from any um, I don't know any kind of dogmatic statement. a declarative statement and say, hey, if a God exists, prove it to me. My mind is open, but right now I don't buy it. And that's the tack that we take. I'm not sure laughing in somebody's face is really going to accomplish all that much. Is your desire to change minds, or are they getting up in your face first? I mean, why laugh at them?
Well, I never bring this up with people. You know what I'm saying? This is not something that I bring up. I usually keep my mouth shut until
Mhm.
something it gets, because of the religious nature of a lot of the people around me, it starts getting pushed on me.
I see.
You know, they
Well,
they
that's
start,
different.
trying to, and
That's
then I'm
different
like,
than, hey,
and
you were
I'm,
hanging out with a religious person, and but if somebody's up in your business, then I mean that's a different conversation. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, they don't, I don't think they mean to, but I just think a lot of religious, like especially Christian, Southern Christian people, really, I mean, I think they have the best of intentions, but sometimes they just don't know when to stop, and when it gets to a certain point, I literally just can't help. At that point, I can't hold it back anymore. I'm just like, this is ridiculous. What are you talking about? And then I'll just tear into their religion, and I don't mean to, I'm actually, that's what I'm part of. I think I'm making a bad name for atheist, and that's why I'm like, maybe I need to have a different name for what I am. Maybe I'm just a jerk. I mean, I don't know.
I don't
I
know,
mean,
John. You want to
atheists can be
jump in on this
jerks.
one?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, atheists can be jerks, and I mean, whenever I have conversations with people, even if something they say is laughable, I try not to laugh in their face. But then again, I more or less try to match energy. So, like, if somebody's coming at me and is like, "You're gonna go to hell for whatever in the hell I don't like," if they're
Oh yeah,
basically doing that and coming at me, then I won't take the conversation seriously. But like, I've had a lot of conversations with, Christians that know how to like have good conversations. And even if they say something that is ridiculous, like, I feel like if I'm looking to try to reach them, or at least so that they can at least come to an understanding that like we just differ on things, like religion, so that we can still exist in the same space, or even have friendly
yeah,
chats about other things. Like, I
yeah,
feel like it's better to, like, if somebody is genuinely trying to talk to you about religion or whatnot, not laughing in their face is probably the best
yeah,
tactic. But like I said, I
yeah,
generally
yeah.
match energy, so it just kind of depends on the situation.
Well, I mean, I bring out some of the worst in some. I'm surrounded by MAGA. I mean, surrounded by it, and I bring out some
uh,
of the worst in them because,
yeah, I'm in North
and those
Alabama, so I
tend to
know
be
what
the
you're talking
same.
about.
They tend to be the same people, and like I've had dudes try to fight me. I mean, try to start fights with me because I don't believe in Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean that's the kind of things I've dealt with on multiple occasions in my life. But this, I've been an atheist for 45 years.
Right.
So I mean,
So yeah, I mean, and I understand that, and I understand that you might be getting tired of it, but typically, like, if somebody starts that kind of thing, I typically try to set a boundary with them, um, especially if it's face to face or anything like that. But I
yeah,
mean, then again, I typically invite discourse on it, and so I invite spirited, I guess, debate, even when it starts, especially when it starts getting. When they start being very demeaning towards me, because then I know that I can just not even take them seriously, and that proves to be fun on
oh,
occasion. But I mean, I would say, as far as like the actual topic of the call that you called in for, and I mean, I feel like you've moved from agnostic atheism to gnostic atheism or hard atheism. That would be more of an assertion that gods don't exist, rather than I'm not convinced that God exists.
okay,
And
so
so, like, that
Gnostic.
still means that you're atheist.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I just like, I didn't know exactly like what it was. I mean, I've heard somebody say hard atheism a couple of times, but I didn't really, I wasn't sure, like if that was what that
I
was
wouldn't
meaning
I
or,
wouldn't trip on the labels all that
Yeah.
much. You don't buy it. You're not buying what they're selling. I think
Yeah,
if someone's coming after you and they're, throwing religiosity in your direction, I think you have every right to set a boundary and even push back. If the goal is changing minds, I would employ a lot of questions, the burden of proof being on them, just have them try to demonstrate. And I just take it on faith. I had a personal experience. What is that line? The plural of anecdote is not evidence, those types of things. But if it
yeah.
drives you that crazy, honestly, if I were you, I would just avoid those discussions outright. If you don't feel like you're going to change their
Well,
minds and they're
I,
just driving you crazy, I would just get on with things.
yeah,
Same.
I really do try to avoid it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's my main tactic is just avoid even talking about it. But like, it's just a thing that, and you just can't escape it around here. People are going to, and when they find out you don't agree with them, some of them they get pushy, and then when they start getting pushy, I don't know, I start laughing at them and mocking them, and that really makes it worse. I know I shouldn't. It's just
No, it gets
and
back to
after
boundaries. It's situational, and the reason I'm
yeah
interjecting is that I really feel like if they're getting in your space, that's different than they believe in God. Now they're crossing a
yeah
boundary, and you have every right to say, no, 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 you don't get to do this. You can decide whether or not you want to talk about it, whether or not you want to engage, but you don't have to stand there and be disrespected or pawed at like some broken thing that needs to be rescued. So just
yeah.
protect yourself out there, draw the boundary where you want. And if you want to engage, I'd use a lot of questions. Okay, Chris?
All right, man. Thanks, guys.
I appreciate you.
All right.
Hang in there
Thanks
in
for calling in.
Tennessee. That's got to be a tough spot to be a non-religious person.
Oh,
On the
definitely.
show schedule tonight, I'm crap with Excel sheets, so I got to come over here and I got to move this thing over so I can see tonight on the Late Show. Matt Dillahunty, Eric, and Arden. That starts at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow night on Skeptalk, it's Aron Ra, Professor Dave. We've got Eve and Alyssa for Chewed Gum Tuesday night. Dillahunty's back with Mandisa Thomas. That's Wednesday. On the Transatlantic Call-In Show, Alexander and Arden going to be with us, and then Jimmy and Forrest are on the Cause I Wanna show, which will be on Friday nights. I don't think I missed any, but all of these will be listed on the Line YouTube page, and you can see that coming soon. And they'll be counting down to the show starts. A lot of good stuff on tap for this week. I don't know, John. I mean, I get it when you say, I don't buy it. I don't believe in God. I just don't. There is no God. We know it's a bunch of bullshit. Like on the surface, I get exactly where he's coming from. It's
Hmm.
tempting, right?
Yeah. I totally get that. Yeah. And I mean, that's why I have just become kind of accustomed to, specifying that, I'm an agnostic atheist, meaning that, I don't know, but I just don't believe. And so like
Oh,
that, I
I
feel like that
misspoke.
is,
Apparently, I said Arden was on one or two of the shows where Arden is producing. That's my fault. Forgive me. So Arden will be with us in spirit. My apologies. Um, sorry. Um, I'm going to close this window and talk to Marty once again. Marty, let's try it a second time. Are you with us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Lo, you are with us always, even into the ends of the earth. What's on your mind?
I tried calling, but I called, I think it was like last week or something like that, and I talked to Matt Dillahunty and Jeremy, I believe is his name, and we talked about the fact that I had brought up the fact that mathematics is the one thing that actually brought me to the notion that there was, at the very least, an intelligent designer, a creator to this place. And
how
I tried to
so?
bring this up to what's that?
Well, I'm just wondering, like, I mean, that you say that is what convinced you, and I'm just wondering how does math like prove that?
Well, ultimately it becomes this question of like, I mean, it kind of gets like presuppositional, and I don't want to go there so much, but it's like, it's sort of like the conversation sort of forces us to. like you had just said, you would talk to the last caller, the caller before, I believe, and you said, imagine a number line. We don't know where you at or on it, and it extends in different directions in both sides, both positively and negative to positive and negative infinity. And so my question, and this is the question I brought up to, I think it's Dr. Jeremy is his name, and Matt, was that where does this mathematical number line that you just spoke about come from? They were saying that mathematics is an emergent property of the complexification of nature. So it's an emergent property. So it's a concept, we just conceived of it in our minds, and then it's an emergent property of nature, etc. But my only problem with that is like, where does this number line, as you're saying, it's infinite, it's ordered.
Right.
There is an order.
But any universe that is going to occupy a space is going to have mathematics like a part of it, because mathematics is, we're going to be comparing geometries, we're going to be calculating spaces is going to, so like these numbers and everything that we are conceptualizing here, I mean, these things are just like, I guess you could call them emergent properties of just any universe that would actually occupy a space. So like that's not actually proof that a God exists, because any space that would exist, like any universe that contains space, time, and everything like that we would exist in, would be mathematical in some sense. So this doesn't actually point us towards a God existing, or that there needs to be a designer.
But the question that, and this actually gets right to what you were just saying, if you're using mathematics to look at literally every universe that could, multiverses that could possibly exist, what I'm asking is, where does that come from in which gives you, the ability to even use it in the first place? If it's an emergent property of nature, meaning it's just the complexification of nature, we look upon nature, we conceive of this math, and we, in this sort of sense, induce it onto nature. Well, then how in the world do we use this, according to you, this infinite number line? How do we use that to explain things that were pre-math? Meaning, if mathematics is an emergent property of nature, evolution, that sort of thing,
what is
then we say,
pre-math?
okay, well, that's my question. Is there, in fact, there can't be a pre-math. This is why it gets presuppositional. For instance, if we were just to say,
yeah, but
I want to talk about
presuppositions are not going to be effective in this conversation. So, like, I mean, I feel like if we can leave out presuppositions, like especially unfounded presuppositions, like there's no reason to suggest pre-math.
Well, except you do. Because if you're saying that mathematics is an emergent property, the complexification of nature, then what you have to say, and that's your stance, then you would have to say that everything that was before that complexification, you could not use mathematics to describe it. And there's a problem with this too, because even if you're to say, let's say we all agree.
Well, hold on. Can we visit that for 1 second? Can we visit that for 1 second? Because what I said was that any universe that would occupy space would be mathematical. Like it would have ratios, it would have geometries and all this other stuff. So it's necessarily like it's a necessarily logically necessary thing for it to exist, right? And so my question is, what's before that? Like what exists outside of time and space? Like, does time exist outside of time and space?
What I'm saying is that before you even can talk about a first thing, and this is what I mean by we actually all agree on this presupposition. You guys actually agree to this too, because before we can even talk about a first thing, let alone what's beyond or outside of this first thing, that would necessitate a number line to say there's a first thing, a second thing, a third thing, etc. Not only that,
I'm not saying a number line physically exists
literally
somewhere.
Well, no, it doesn't. It's a metaphysical, which actually shows you that there's a supernatural aspect to it. Let me explain.
No. Me positing, hold on. Me conceptually positing that a number line, like this is a concept in math for us to like visually demonstrate like the wide range of numbers that do exist in our understanding. That has like no bearing on anything that you're talking about here. Like that's a conceptual thing in math that we use in order to like understand things in reality, but that doesn't mean that it's supernatural. Like number lines aren't supernatural. These are just things that are useful for us in understanding numbers, I guess, like sets of numbers. I don't know. Seth,
Okay,
did you have any thoughts?
they're not even. Yeah, well, no, because they're not just like useful. It's the foundation of literally every science that's out there. In fact, if you just look on like AI and that sort of stuff, it'll even tell you that there's no science is complete without math. Even in fields that appear not to require much math, basic calculations or statistical analysis may be still used in research and data interpretation. So when you say it's just something that we conceive, that's actually incorrect, because I don't conceive that 2 + 2 = 4. That's an absolute
I didn't
fact.
say
And
that.
it's a fact
I said the conception is the
quantitatively in
number line.
everybody's mind.
It's not. No. I said that
Well,
these kinds of things that we're talking about here. I said that these kinds of things, like mathematical things, like math as a part of reality in general, is a logical necessity for any region of space time that has like space in it, like that anything would exist within. Like it's a logical necessity, is what I'm saying. So, like it being a logical
exactly.
necessity,
It's a number line.
no, not a number line. I'm moving
Exactly, though.
past a number line. I don't know why the fuck you're focusing on number
Well,
lines here.
because the number line is the thing that actually establishes the numbers in the order that they're in. 3 comes after 2, and 5 comes after 4, and that never changes to literally anybody, anywhere. It doesn't matter what language you speak, even what planet you're on. In order for us to even understand something like the Higgs boson equation, that requires us. That's a big mathematical equation. If the Higgs boson is the thing that created everything, and we're using mathematics to explain it, and yet you're saying that the number line, as we're just 1, 2, 3, etc., is an emergent property of the physicality of nature, then how in the world are we using this emergent property to go before math, pre-math, and explain the universe using math? That doesn't make any sense at all. We can't even
So how are we using math to explain
One
the
at a time.
inflation? Yeah, sorry. It's just when you
you-
gish gallop like this, Marty, it's really hard for me to address everything that you're saying because you just keep repeating the same things over and over and over again, and I never get a word in edgewise here. I mean, I'm pretty secure in my understanding and grasp of math, and I don't know what you're talking about when you talk about there being math being used prior to a space for math to be applicable to. Like, I don't understand like
I'm not.
that concept.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you are saying that. That's what you're
I'm not saying that.
because you're
Seth,
making.
have I said that at all? Have I said that at
believe
all?
so.
No,
Uh,
that's the
if I
position that is
may,
a necessity
Marty,
for. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
if I
Apologize.
may, don't we aren't we in need of reversing the looking glass a little bit? We have developed the mathematics that we use to be able to measure the universe in which we live, and we realize that those measurements work because they work, right? So if 2 + 2 = 4, well, these are processes that are descriptive, not prescriptive. And I'm really sort of beyond all of that, struck by how it's kind of a pedantic question. Like, what kind of designer are we defending in this regard? I'm sorry, there's mathematics and mathematical equations and measurements work. Therefore, there is an intelligence out there somewhere. Uh, I'm having a hard time latching on to the importance. If there was an intelligence that created the mathematical objective standard by which we all must live, and then that intelligent agent disappeared, what do I care? So I'm asking, what do you care, Marty?
What do I care? I guess.
I mean, I'm
what?
asking
I don't
if
even know how
there
to.
was a
Like,
designer and that designer is totally uninvolved beyond setting some sort of an objective mathematical standard 13.8 billion or more years ago, then what? What
I don't know.
meaningful
That's a
role
total
would that
hypothetical. I'm
agent
not
have in
dealing
your
with
life?
hypotheticals. What I'm dealing with. Those are all hypotheticals. I'm not dealing with hypotheticals. What I'm dealing with is that when we look at science, there's not a branch of science that doesn't use mathematics. Correct. That mathematics is universal. It's ordered. It goes 1, 2, 3. Not only that, every single number has its correspondence in geometry, and none of that changes. We don't get to decide whether a hexagon is a hexagon. So when we talk about, oh, mathematics is just something that's conceived, if we conceive it, just like if I conceive a song, I can change the chorus of that song. And it's totally up to me because it's a conception. It's something I made in my mind. Can you change the properties of the number 7? Or is the number 7 always going to be a prime? Is it
I
always going to
disagree with
be
your premise.
after 6
I
and
disagree
before
with your
8?
premise. If we have developed the processes to measure the the dimensions of the world that we live in, and we know that those processes work, it doesn't mean there was an agent at the beginning, an intelligence that necessarily put all that in place. And I'll tell you, if you want to go and present to me the idea that there is an intelligent designer, I just released a whole speech on intelligent design and why, beyond any concept of mathematics, the idea that we are, the world is, the universe is intelligently designed absolutely falls apart at the most cursory of scrutiny. So I just find the
Well,
entire,
Seth,
when we can
just so
talk
you
about
know, I
math all
actually did
day, do
watch
you want to
part of
talk
it.
about intelligent design on the more macro spectrum? Because I'd love to do that.
Well, I guess we got to first get past that. If we're going to talk about intelligent design, we have to first talk about intelligence. And one of the ways that we actually transmit information to one another scientifically, no question whatsoever, is through the subject of math. Once again, as we were saying, you guys just talked about particles, particle accelerators, CERN, the Higgs boson, tomography, gravity, light years, cell division,
I'm going
electron.
to put you on mute, Marty, because you're reiterating the same shit over and over. And I think we've been more than patient. I just think he's looking at it through the looking glass the wrong way, where he sees mathematics as prescriptive. And I think these are processes that we have, these are measurements that we have developed that work. I'm not a mathematician. But beyond that, if he's going to say, well, there is an intelligent designer because math, I'm like, well, you have just started an entire, much larger conversation about what intelligent design even looks like. Do you have any final thoughts, John, before I move on?
Not really, I guess. I'm very unpersuaded by this mathematics argument, just because we have natural explanations for why math, like why the universe is mathematical in nature and everything like that. And just because we've been able to describe nature mathematically and been able to understand nature with its mathematical basis, I don't think that that's any kind of evidence like for a god. Like I would need to hear some kind of convincing argument, and I just don't think that it exists.
I don't know. We look at intelligent design and I think, all right, well, math. So what? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I literally, I just released a speech on this. It's called Seth Andrews versus God, who is the better intelligent designer? And we say, all right, fine. If you want to say that there is an intelligence behind the design of life, the universe, and everything, then we got to talk about design, whether it's the testicle, whether it's the female birth canal, whether it's the appendix, whether it's animals that have to eat each other alive, whether it's being right-handed or left-handed and having a dominant and a near useless hand, coding problems in our genome, a sun that gives us cancer. I mean, just one thing after the other. And so we can speak in these esoteric ways about math. But like, if you want to talk about design, I think those are also much more interesting conversations as well. Design my ass. Jeremiah from Texas. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Welcome. What's on your mind?
All right. So before I get into what I want to talk about, I just want to make sure I'm barking up the right tree. John, you say you are a mythicist, correct?
I do.
And by mythicist, you do mean that there was no real guy who inspired the Gospels, correct?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I don't believe that there was a historical Jesus in history. I lean towards him being completely mythical.
Okay. Okay, then. So may I have a minute to explain why I do not believe that?
Jeremiah, back off your phone just a couple of inches. You're distorting a little bit. But yeah, tell us what you're thinking.
I apologize. Okay,
No
let me
worries.
back up a bit. All right. So what I'm thinking is the Gospels are mostly myth. That I do agree with. However, there's an interesting little conundrum there because they're trying to fit Jesus into these Old Testament prophecies, especially the ones that say the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, but they have to twist themselves into pretzels to do it because he also needs to be from Nazareth. Now, my thought is,
No, well, can you explain that for me? Sorry, I'm sorry. I know that you're trying to explain right now, but I guess I reject a couple of these premises. I think that the Gospels, there's no way to determine what is or isn't mythical and historical in them. From what I can tell, most, if not all, of the basic facts that are presented in the Gospels, they're all mythically based. So they're legendary. They're just made up stories about Jesus, or made up facts about Jesus, for one. For two, it's interesting that you say that Jesus needs to be from both places. In fact, if we look at the original gospel, which is the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is called a Nazarene, and not that he's from Nazareth. But it's a kind of a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation from the Old Testament that he needs to be from Nazareth because of the branch of Jesse and everything like that. In fact, there's actually a better
that's not
argument
where
to
I
be
was
made.
going with it, but
I understand,
what,
but I mean, you're saying a few things, and so I just wanted to sort of get ahead of some of these things. In fact, the Gospel of Mark seems to indicate that Jesus, at least the Jesus depicted in Mark, more than likely came from Capernaum and not like Nazareth or Bethlehem. Bethlehem doesn't come into the picture until much later in the Gospel story, in the Gospel timeline. So, I mean, but go ahead. Why do you think it was based on a real person?
I mean, my idea is that if Jesus was from Nazareth, and if I recall correctly, there is some archaeological precedent for that having been a place, or from Galilee in general, which is, I think, the wider region. My point is that why would the Gospels twist themselves into pretzels to try to make him from Bethlehem, at least the ones that go that route, if there wasn't a guy? Why would the authors put themselves in that position instead of just filling the prophecy? It'd be so much easier if there was no guy.
Right. Okay. So this is the Hitchens response to like mythicism, I guess. So basically, what you have is these first century Jewish Christians. They were scrounging the Hebrew Bible, like the Septuagint, for prophecies about the Messiah. And so what they were doing was they were creating pesherums where they would reinterpret Old Testament scriptures and create this new information about the Messiah, because they thought that God was giving them this secret information that was encoded into the Old Testament, or the Septuagint at the time. And so they were reinterpreting these things, and so they basically reinterpreted a few things that they had to twist into getting some kind of idea about. And so like the Nazareth and the Bethlehem thing is an example. They got the Nazareth thing from the root of Jesse. I can't remember which one that is, but then there's Bethlehem, which seems to go back to another passage that claims that that Jesus would be from the birthplace of David, or David's hometown and everything, right? And so basically what you have are these Jewish rabbis that were eventually going to be Christians. They were just reinterpreting these Old Testament passages to be about Jesus when it wasn't originally about Jesus at all. They had to actually twist the information into it. And this also coincides with Paul's writings, in that Paul never states where Jesus comes from. He never states that Jesus actually had a hometown or anything like that. So we don't actually get any kind of indication as to Jesus either walking on earth or even having a hometown to come from until Mark's gospel in between 75 CE to like just after 70 CE. That's the first indication that we get that Jesus even had a hometown.
Okay, that I can see why that would make sense to you. For me, I'm not really convinced there was or wasn't a guy. I'm kind of in the middle. It makes more sense for there to have been a scam artist working in the first century who amassed a cult following.
Right. Sorry. I just want to get to the core of the issue here. So, other than like the Hitchens argument for it, what makes you think that there was like a historical Jesus? Like, are there any like elements of fact that we know to be historical fact as part of the Jesus story past the birthplace argument?
Well, if you look at the mundane elements of the stories, specifically, like you ignore all the miracles and all of that, we know that cults can go on to found religions. The Mormons are a great example of that. We know that the Romans executed people that they viewed as subversives to the state. So, and then the mundane claims are that there was a guy who developed a cult following and then was executed by the Romans.
Well, no. There's actually no evidence that he was executed by the Romans, and
I'm not saying that specific guy was. I'm just saying that we know that the Romans executed people in that way, not that they executed that specific guy.
But Jesus wasn't a threat to the Romans. Sorry, Seth. It looks like you want to say something here.
No, not at all. I wanted Jeremiah to finish his point. I want to give him a little bit of oxygen here, and then we'll come back. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
Well, I mean,
no worries.
That pretty much was it. It's just the mundane elements of the story, to me, seem plausible. Not saying they're necessarily historical, just plausible.
Well, I wouldn't say plausible. What I would say is possible. Like it's possible there was a guy. It's possible he was crucified by the Romans. But I feel like your argument here really heavily relies on the Gospels, in that the Gospels blame the Romans for his crucifixion. But we don't actually have any information like from Paul's works that identify the Romans specifically as being the ones that crucified him. And I do agree that the Romans would crucify or execute people that were a threat to the state or whatnot, but I don't see any evidence that Jesus was a threat to the state. What I see evidence of, as far as like the general tone of the Gospels, and even the tone of Paul, is that Jesus was a threat to the Sanhedrin. And so the Sanhedrin would have been the one to actually execute Jesus in this particular fashion. You even have, passages in the Hebrew Bible where crucifixion is even prescribed, a form of persecution, not Roman persecution, obviously, but a form of crucifixion was actually prescribed for certain infringements on God's law. So it would have actually been, the Sanhedrin or the Jews to directly do this, as opposed to them pawning Jesus's crucifixion off on the Romans. So it kind of seems like none of this actually makes sense in context, especially when you consider the actual evidence that we have through Paul's epistles. So like even the mundane things, I can't actually place those in history. Sure, possible, plausible, not when you consider all of the evidence that we have.
All right. I won't say I'm convinced that Jesus didn't exist, but I see where you're coming from, and that does make sense.
Hey, Jeremiah, for what it's worth, I don't know either, right? I mean, there might have been a charismatic guy that Jesus, the supernatural God-man Jesus character was based on, and it might have been a hybrid of previous deities, or like some celestial deities or whatnot. So you and I fall in the same boat. I have no idea. I don't take a position either way. Okay.
Oh yeah,
All
and
right.
I
Yeah,
just want to
that's
specify that I don't require people to take a certain position or anything like that. I'm perfectly fine with people not being on board like I am. I guess just when people are kind of curious about it and they're wondering like, why don't you think that? I tend to info dump, and so like that's kind of what happened here.
okay.
I get it in my
Yeah,
head,
I
and I'm
get it.
like, oh nope, there's this thing, that thing, this thing, and so it just sort of careens.
I think
That's
these are
where,
interesting conversations,
yeah.
whether they're academic or not. I think if we know that God-man Jesus didn't exist, but where the Jesus character originated, I mean, these are fascinating conversations, and I think worthy ones. Any final thoughts, Jeremiah? Didn't mean to interrupt you, brother.
Oh no, that was everything. I really just kind of wanted to prod at the mythicism, kind of get more clarity on where that's coming from, and I think I have. So I appreciate your time. Thank you both. I hope you have a good rest of your show.
And Jeremiah, if I can suggest, I would definitely suggest looking into mystery cults in the first century BCE and first century CE, and how those mystery cults seem to coincide with a lot of the things that are taught about Jesus. I would look into that specifically.
Let me write that
Thanks for
down
calling,
real
man.
quick. Have a good day.
See you later. It's funny, there's a documentary that's very problematic, came out 10, 12 years ago, called Zeitgeist. And it made a bunch of parallels between Christ. Bill Maher fell into this trap with Religulous, because he quoted, I think, from Zeitgeist about the Jesus and the Horus correlations, which are very sketchy. And yet there are a lot of pre-Jesus deities that had the same characteristics of Christ. Like I think it was Inanna, the Egyptian goddess who was crucified. I think it was Perseus. There was another deity that had a virgin birth, with a deity for a dad and a human mother. And, we do find a lot of interesting parallels. We find a different Jesus written about in each of the four gospels. They act differently. They were born differently. They died differently. They had different characteristics. One was more human and the other was more of a God figure. And it's interesting because when I was in the faith, they never taught us to read these things side by side. We always read the Gospels one at a time and we never compared them side by side. It was like Genesis 1 and 2. We never saw the creation story and thought, hey, wait a minute. These two different accounts are in different orders and they say different things. It's a totally different story. We just never did that. And then you feel stupid when you get older and you realize, hey, wait, it was right in front of me in black and white. I don't know if there was a real Jesus or not, but I think your point is a salient one. If I was to write a headline today about something that was foretold, but I had 100-year-old newspaper making the prediction before I write my version of the story, right? Well, that's pretty convenient. So the New Testament authors have all of these older texts, and they're like, you know what? Let's conveniently make it so all the dots get connected in this supernatural way. I find that the prophecy arguments are pretty unimpressive. Brian is a theist who is calling from Illinois. Brian, welcome. Are you there?
I am here. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Talk to us. What's on your mind?
So I'm going to convert you in 10 seconds. I'm just joking, but so here's the thing that I've always had a problem with. I love the line. I love you guys. I love always questioning everything you believe in. But one of the problems that I always have is, what is it, like Descartes is the construction guy, correct? Am I saying the name
Descartes?
right? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you can deconstruct to and this is obviously one of the philosopher's problem is that you can deconstruct everything into literally meaningless. So at some point you have to construct something. We all need humanity, civilization needs some kind of ideals to coalesce around, right? As in, what was? Man, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, but he said culture is religion incarnate, right?
No.
It was a guy in the Reagan administration that went to jail because the whole Watergate
I'm
thing.
sorry,
But,
I have
anyway,
no idea what's being discussed right now.
I'm not sure. I'm guessing he may be talking about William Bennett if he's talking about a Reagan era guy.
No, Chuck Colson.
Oh,
Chuck
yeah,
Colson.
Chuck Colson. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
Nixon.
Yeah.
But okay.
He said religion, culture is religion incarnate. And one of the things that I always have is hey, it's always good and it's always a great thing to try to find a situation what you believe in, deconstruct it and try to reconstruct it or whatever you want to say. But one of the problems that I always have with my friendly, loving atheist is that it's really easy to argue against Christianity, but and we can sit here and I couldn't do it because it's kind of meaningless to go through the little text and everything. But there's the ideals of life actually matter. We all need to kind of agree on certain things, and certain ideas have certain aspects of life that will either produce something good or something bad. And what I always find with the line with you guys, which is totally cool and I understand, is trying to fight against the ideals that Christianity proves. But there's never the ideas of as in there's negative and then there's the positive ideas where we can.
Hang on, Brian.
And I don't mean that.
Brian.
Yes, sir.
There are so many different ideas. There's so many different directions coming at us at one time. I would like to dial us back. Would that be all right? Can I dial us back to one of the first claims that you made, that if we deconstruct and deconstruct, then ultimately there would be nothing left. At some point, you have
Yeah,
to
that's
construct.
actually like
Let me finish,
that's
Brian,
like a.
if you would.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah,
All right.
you're good.
I'm going to slow you down. I want you to take a breath. Let's slow your pacing. Let's have a conversation. I know you're enthusiastic, and I appreciate that. Okay. Well, at some point, we can deconstruct something to the point where it reveals that it has very faulty construction or it falls apart outright. Or we can deconstruct something down to an essence or down to something solid where it cannot be deconstructed any further. But there is still some structure there. So, many times, what we mean by deconstruct is we're sort of reverse engineering. We say, where did it come from? How does it work? What do the gears do? And this idea that if we deconstruct everything, everything would essentially uh, dissolve. I sort of don't buy that analogy. I think when you talk about religion and culture, I disagree with that statement outright. I do think that we are creatures that have evolved to want structure. I think we enjoy, and religion certainly fit this model, but culture and religion, not the same thing. I'm a big fan of having culture, of having ritual, of having structure. Those types of things help to frame the human experience, but they are not religion. And so, beyond that, I mean, am I making sense before we continue on, Brian? I just wanted to address those first two things.
I I wouldn't disagree with you, but like I would I would disagree, but agree with some of the stuff you said, and like that's like an impossible 3-hour conversation that would be really boring
Which
to
part
the
do you
viewers.
disagree with? I'm just curious. Which part troubles you?
Well,
The part that
we
culture and
all have
religion are not the same, or that deconstruction doesn't mean we dismantle everything?
I can go with both. Deconstruct. If you actually, once again, I'll mess up the name. Descartes is like if you follow the deconstruction of everything, you can actually even accept Descartes because he's an authority. So it's actually kind of like uh, my point being is like I actually agree with you and not Descartes is that you can only deconstruct something to a point, and then you kind of got to reconstruct everything. And
Who
that's
made
actually
Descartes an authority? Where did that come from?
no. I'm just saying like Descartes. I'm probably saying it wrong. I'm sorry. I'm just. But we both know what we're talking.
Brian,
What's the argument here? I don't know what the argument is. For God,
I'm making the.
Did I miss
I'm
it?
making the. I'll make the argument now. Is that like I actually agree with Seth? Is that you can't deconstruct everything to oblivion. You need to have humanity, families, neighborhoods, towns. We all need to have like a construction. We need to be able to have a social construction. So the question
okay, I'm going to
is
stop you, Brian. Forgive me. I think we have a disagreement on definitions. When we talk about deconstruction, that's the
Yes.
reverse engineering of a claim or an idea or a belief system. What you're talking
Yes.
about is a construction of a society, a framework for
Correct.
living for individuals and the community that consists of those individuals. These are apples and oranges. These are two totally different things.
I would agree with you, but that's what I'm trying to actually say is like we can deconstruct everything that we believe, but we need to have a construction of how we like operate in society. Correct? You know what I mean? Is like, for example, like I think you guys would agree. Like we're all Americans, right? And we kind of follow like the Constitution, but there's more. Like if you just follow the Constitution, you're missing a whole bunch. So we need to be able to construct a society that parallels the Constitution in America. And one of the problems I have is that it's really easy to like argue against something, but it's it's actually much harder to construct something. And my problem that I've always had with my atheist friends that and please believe me, with all due respect, I love you guys. I really do.
Yeah, I don't need all the
Is
caveats. What I want is your argument, Brian. All right. But I understand that we are
no, but
creating
actually
society
no. That's
norms. Hang on, hold on. We're creating a structure for our society, and we are creating even rules for ethical behavior within that society. You and I do not
what
disagree.
are
I think
they?
it's necessarily based on
Yeah. But what are
consenting.
they? That's my
Hold
problem. Because
on
like,
just a second for me, Brian. I would like
of
to
course,
finish this thought. Would that be all right?
sounds
Okay.
good. Yes.
So I think it's fair to say that we rather than pinballing around at random like a bunch of gnats, have as communal creatures, as societal creatures, have created systems in which those communities live, and those systems include culture, they include rules, they include codes of conduct, they include forms of expression, and so many other things. And those things are, I think, healthy and beneficial. Those are pro-social. Now I'm going to put you on mute for just a second because I want John to be able to chime in while we have a brief moment. John, did you have anything to say about deconstruction or construction? I'm trying to figure out what his point is. He said he was trying to prove God or
Yeah.
Christianity.
I don't. Yeah, I'm still waiting for the plan to land on like why God exists. As far as he understands God to exist. And so I'm still trying to figure that out. But as far as deconstruction goes, I feel like deconstruction is just about really analyzing what you believe and why you believe it. And people sometimes deconstruct just out of um their particular version of Christianity, like whether that version of Christianity is like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, or anything like that, and then they just become another denomination. I mean, that's one way deconstruction can happen. So, like, I don't understand how deconstruction like works into this or what is even being said. I'm trying to follow, but it's just, I guess I feel like I'm having a difficult time
No,
actually following the
it's not you.
caller's like point.
It's not you,
Okay.
John. There are 1,000 different arrows going in 1,000 different directions. Brian, is there a way you can tie all of this into Christianity for me?
Yes, and I appreciate what you guys were saying, and I want to make sure you understand. Is like I deconstructed a lot, and then I got to that point of what you were talking about, Seth. Is like, okay, here's where we're at. We're at a family level. We're at a community level, and I have a hard time with Christianity saying everything that Christianity says and everything that they believe that the Christians have taught since the beginning of time is actually ridiculously logical and perfect, and I can't argue against it. So that's where we're at. Is you, for example, you would have to like argue to a Christian and to explain to them why, for example, a man marrying a woman is a problem, and that should be the basis of all families. When in the for example, a man marrying a woman and having children is the basis of a family, and then the family is the basis of the community, and the community is the basis of the civilization. So if you break that down and fight against that, everything falls apart, starts falling apart. And
I disagree with your premise. I disagree with your premise. I'm not sure we're in productive waters here, Brian. But even if Christianity, let's say that happened to be true, and it's not, that a man and a woman are the basis for the family, and that this came from Christianity. Well, Christianity could also be a book of mythology. The Bible could be a mythological book and have made that claim. It wouldn't mean that the God of Christianity was real. but we see
Yeah,
family coming in so many forms, and we understand how
yeah.
families and communities work evolutionarily. The fact that something was printed in the Bible and said, "Hey, we're going to define a family in this specific way," doesn't mean that that is the model for family or even a healthy model for family. I disagree with your premise. Brian, I'm going to move on to the
I would
next
just
call. I do appreciate you very much. I've got Michael from Europe. Michael, are you with us?
Yeah.
Welcome. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
I was just calling because you said in the stream title that you give us the reason to convert, and
Give us a reason.
I wanted
Yeah,
to,
we're ready.
yeah, I wanted to approach this in a way to discuss the difference in how atheists and believers approach the faith. From what you've observed, I will mostly focus on Christians. Uh, what do you have experience with them, with Christians want to promote when they talk about the faith in general?
Ask that question again. I missed it.
When Christians talk about their faith and they're amongst themselves and they talk about the things that they want to talk about, what have you noticed that they focus on?
What have I noticed anecdotally,
Yeah,
personally, subjectively that Christians talk about amongst themselves?
yeah, sure.
Mostly, I see them speak in a cursory way about their faith. I don't see
Mm-hmm.
much about theology. It's more about community. It's more about a culture of Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Because the way I wanted to approach this issue is that when a group is together amongst itself, it focuses on the things which are important to it. So if you would want to convert, like you said, you want to hear reasons too, then you would approach the things that you want to convert to see the things that they value and how you have appreciations for the things that they want to support, stuff like this. Uh, the way I describe that Christians among themselves, like both in their communities and when they write theological treatises and so on, they focus mainly on the virtues, on charity, on salvation overall. But that's a topic which with atheists is more difficult to discuss. But mainly focusing on the spiritual uh, calmness, the deepness, and the virtues, and uh, prudence.
Michael, I
I'm
need a
sorry to
question or
interrupt.
comment here, my friend. I need you to
Yeah,
Sure.
get to
yeah.
your destination for me.
Mhm.
Sorry, that's what I was going to ask to land the plane on this. Do you think that you can convert us away from atheism?
Probably not, and I will tell you something which I noticed from earlier in the stream. Like, hold up, John, you said that if you had some evidence related to like some miracle, you wouldn't know if that was a hallucination or not, right? This is something
Well,
similar to what you said.
well, I mean, I gave that as one possible conclusion that it's just a hallucination or
Mhm.
whatever. But I mean, more importantly, I think that it's just, in more, I guess, maybe abstractly, is how do I know that it's just not some natural phenomena that I either don't understand or it just doesn't occur to me in the moment. So, like, how do we separate out these miracles or these magical events from just normal natural phenomena that we either don't understand or we don't understand yet?
Hmm.
I know it's a difficult
Yeah.
question. How do you discern
Yeah.
between those two? I mean, honestly, I feel like discerning something is non-magical is actually pretty easy because magic doesn't seem to exist as far as we understand it. So, like, it seems like the more likely conclusion for any kind of phenomena that we would experience is going to be a natural explanation. That's where I would go first. It would take an immense amount of evidence, like a substantial amount of evidence, in order to prove that some magical thing that I think happened actually did happen.
Yeah, I would say that that is a little bit of a problem, but in the sense that it's easy to come at this with the baseline that magic doesn't exist, so you don't see anything out of the ordinary, and so you continue on your observation that okay, there isn't anything magical. But in the case that there would be something magical, and you approaching this, finding something which relates to magic, when you
I'm
do,
totally lost.
you
Let
still,
me address something quickly.
yeah,
I put a C in your name, and there's not one. I've been calling you Michael. Please tell me your first name, and so I can pronounce it correctly.
Michael.
Mihail, please accept my apology. I'm so sorry. Let me make that
Yeah,
note right here. I
Yeah,
I have no
if we
idea
could.
what your question is about magic and all of these other things about Christianity. We are so far out in the weeds. We're going to have to dial it in, or I'm going to move on, my friend. Do you have just a way to synopsize your question in a nutshell?
well, this part of it is complicated, and it needs uh, some detail which you probably don't have time on this issue. I would like to mention something which also happened earlier in the stream. You said that you have this series about how you'd make a better intelligent design than God is presented to have made.
Mm-hmm.
From what metric do you approach that? Like, according to which measurement?
How would I gauge better design? Well, if let's say I was to design a birthing process that didn't result in damage, great pain and damage to tissue, potential threats to both the mother and the baby, I would consider that to be better because I can understand the concepts of harm. I can understand what damage to tissues. I can understand what pain is. And so I can then assess what would be a better design, larger pelvis, or we do something different with the birth canal. Or in the speech, I actually gave the example of the kangaroo as kind of a tongue in cheek alternative. But I don't think it's all that difficult to say one is more harmful than another, one is more painful than another, because we can understand those concepts.
Okay. So it's in terms of the function of the organ itself. The funny thing I found about this is that the intelligent design perspective, well, some people take it also in the terms of the physicality of it, but the purpose of the design, at least theologically speaking, isn't on the material function of the organs and themselves. It's um, the intelligent design would be the way that these qualities in each person in the universe uh, come together to um, give us the opportunities to explore the uh, more psychological and spiritual lessons, having what God wants to teach us overall, like having this space in which we can uh, see a
Where
better.
is this
Mihail,
going?
Mihail,
Hmm?
thank you for the
Yeah,
call. We're going to go ahead and move
yeah.
on, my friend. Okay. We'll see you later.
Perfect.
So, what I was hearing at the end there, if I can synopsize once again what the caller was attempting to say, was that even those parts of the design which are suboptimal, even painful, potentially damaging, or part of a larger model to exercise our faith. I've also heard other people say that the good stuff belongs to Yahweh, but if there's some bad design or there's something that is destructive out there, that's because Eve sinned in the garden along with Adam, the fall of humankind, free will. There's a bunch of silly putty excuses for why bad design exists. These people are not stopping to say, hey, why would a God who knew everything past, present, and future, the one who foreknew the immediate failure of that design, why would he continue in the first place? A variation on that is, why would God create anyone he foreknew would end up in hell? Gigi from North Carolina, are you with me?
Yes.
Welcome.
Can
Thanks
you
for
hear me?
calling. What's on your mind?
Well, about 8 months to a year ago, I realized the error of my ways and became an atheist. But just, well, let me tell you my story. My grandfather was a Quaker minister, and I went to Sunday school, you know, faithfully every day. But I just couldn't reconcile the fact that supposedly God created everyone, but he had chosen people and he caused wars that, you know, killed people, which was not in the Ten Commandments, or was in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. So, you know, and nobody could tell me anything, so that just kind of simmered in my brain for a long time. And I just went along and played with the little flannel board in Sunday school and had a good time. But I don't know, since the death of my daughter and all the destruction and mess that's been going on, I was like, where is he? You know, if he's there, how could he choose a certain group of people out of the ones, all the ones he created? And I know I'm right in the way I feel now, but sometimes I feel like maybe, I don't know, I just having a little bit of problems with it.
Well, Gigi, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your daughter. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry for the pain that you've had in your life. Some people call this the problem of evil, or they'll say, what hurt you in your life? That's why you doubted God. And I honestly think that a better way to phrase it is the problem of needless suffering is
Yeah.
a legitimate angle to take when we assess an omnibenevolent, omni God. And so I think the fact that you're asking these questions and that you have really sort of put religion's feet to the fire is pretty gutsy. It's pretty brave of you. Our minds and our hearts often are engaged in a tug of war. I remember coming out of the faith logically, I knew the Bible was false, but in my heart, I struggled with things like hell and community and what's going to happen to my relationships and what if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And all those things are natural. John, did you have anything for Gigi as far as her journey's concerned? It sounds like she's having some struggles here and there.
Yeah, just echoing what Seth's already said. I'm so sorry for your loss. I hate that you've had to go through that. And I definitely want to emphasize that no matter how like you've come to not believing in God, whether that be because of, you know, this incredible loss that you've suffered or any other thing in your life, it's still very much a valid reason. There are a lot of religious people out there that try to make it out to be like it's not valid to doubt God's existence just because you've had a profound loss in your life, and that's just horseshit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that whatever way that you've come to reassessing what you believe and why you believe it, it's all totally valid. And I think that the needless suffering, if the God of the Bible actually exists, it feels like God wouldn't allow needless suffering. There's several different ways in which God could, you know, proof, you know, or at least fix the world to where there is no needless suffering. But it seems like he's pretty content with needless suffering existing. So it becomes a pretty giant question for Christianity. Like, does that make God not omnibenevolent? But at the same time, God is claimed to be omnibenevolent. And so you have to get yourself into a position of either accepting that, well, God is omnibenevolent, but he does these horrible things, or he allows these horrible things to happen. So these things are good. And so typically whenever I'm in a conversation with like somebody and they're wanting to say that God is omnibenevolent, I end up getting them into a corner where they're trying to actually justify why like um killing a small child is okay. Like as a
Yeah.
matter of like the Hebrew Bible, Numbers 31 is a good example of this. God directly commands the Israelites to plunge their swords directly into the chests of babies, right? And only take the virgin girls for themselves. So like this is something that God commands, and typically
Yeah.
this ends up with them having to get into a position of saying, well, that was a good thing. And so like it's a totally legitimate thing to like be like, no, that's not good, therefore that God doesn't exist. So I mean, I
Right.
think that you're totally valid in whatever way that you're feeling about like God, Yahweh, or whatever. And I just would advise not letting any Christian sort of get to you when they tell you that it's not a valid thing.
Yeah, I can't speak to my husband about it because there's just no talking with him. I mean, it's religion. God is there. You don't question it. And if I do have a valid question, he just says, well, ask the minister. Well, he doesn't know. I mean,
Mhm.
so
Well, ultimately,
I
your
know that
journey
I'm
is
right.
about you, right? You don't
Yeah.
owe anybody else an explanation. You can engage in the conversations that you choose to. It's kind of sucks when your life partner and you can't talk about these things, but I
Yeah.
get it, right? You have gone through a sea change in your own life, one that was unexpected, and so now you're doing a cost benefit analysis as to what am I going to get out of this, and how bad's it going to be, and is it even worth it? But, just make sure that you don't feel like you're a coward if you don't go and shout it from the mountaintops. Right now, you're still figuring things out. You're still asking the
Yeah.
questions. So take your time, take a breath, give yourself some grace. And as long as you are living true to yourself in your mind and heart, that's the most important thing. I think that's where you start. Okay.
She did leave me a beautiful gift. I have a granddaughter that, well, she'll be 20 on Halloween, and she's in college now, and she's like me. She doesn't believe in God because she told me the night when her mother was in the hospital, she just prayed and prayed and prayed and cried, and but nothing happened.
Yeah. I'm going to
Nothing
give you a
changed.
website, Gigi. I'm going to give you a website. It's recoveringfromreligion.org.
Okay.
And they have phones where you can call in. They have chats where you can dial online. If you're not comfortable even giving your name, you can speak anonymously, but talk about a safe place where you can get all this stuff off your chest. They're not going to tell
Yeah.
you what to think. They're not going to tell you what to believe or not believe. Mostly, they are there to listen, encourage, and support. And
Right.
that's a resource. If I were you, Gigi, I would take advantage of it. Okay.
Okay. Well, that religion.
Recoveringfromreligion.org.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
thank you guys so much, and I appreciate what y'all do, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Big hugs from both of us. We'll see you later.
Okay.
All
Bye bye.
righty. I've got two left here. A theist out of Florida. Man, they've been getting their asses kicked, haven't they? Andrew is on the line. Andrew, thanks for waiting and thanks for calling. Are you there?
What's up, heathens?
Andrew, what part of Florida?
Miami.
You guys doing okay in Miami? How's it been?
Good, good. The previous hurricane didn't really hit us. Um,
Mhm.
we weren't very affected by it. It's mostly Central and North Florida that got it.
Everybody's watching this new one. I guess it's supposed to strike around, what, Wednesday, something like that? And the path looks
Yeah,
brutal. It looks like the whole freaking state of Florida. So,
yeah. All the different paths show it's gonna hit us pretty like solid. So
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear about all the troubles in Florida and beyond. What's on your mind, Andrew? What do you want to talk about?
yeah, Godless Engineer, because he calls himself a mythicist, he's basically claiming Jesus did not exist. But
I am
but
claiming that. Yep.
throughout his online
It's not.
content, he
It's not.
doesn't
It's
really
not.
provide.
Sorry. I just want to interject. I'm not basically claiming it. I am claiming that.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And I throughout your online content that I follow, you don't really provide evidence for it. You just debunk evidence
No, no, I do.
for
I
it.
provide evidence.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you provide
What what
evidence,
what what, what do you want to know? Well, I mean, what I'm asking is, what do you want to know?
okay, because you because debunking that someone ever existed, that it's a logical fallacy to say there's no evidence for this creature, so it's less
How is that a
likely
logical
than like
fallacy? What logical fallacy is it? Can you name the logical fallacy?
absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I don't say that.
Right. But that's what we that's the basic
I
concept.
don't say that. So that makes no sense for you to say that I say that.
Okay.
I'm
So
Yeah.
I
curious,
mean, do you?
John. Well, let's
Yeah.
flesh this out, if I can jump
Mhm.
in.
Yeah,
There
definitely.
was no Jesus. That's your position?
Mhm. Yep.
Nutshell that for me. There
Oh,
was no
definitely.
Jesus because.
Okay, so there was no Jesus because our earliest reference to Jesus only pictures him as a celestial figure, and then later stories that were concocted are similar to other mystery cults like the Isis and Osiris cult that construct earthly tales of the savior figure in order to entice people into the religion, and then once they get into the religion, they learn the mysteries of the religion, which would be like the celestial stories of the faith. Paul uses a lot of this language. That is utilized by other mystery cults. They Paul only ever identifies Jesus as a celestial figure, and this actually matches up with what other mystery cults were saying at the time. And also, like all of the major claims by Christianity, specifically what Jesus provides Christians that believe in him, are the same things that other mystery cults provide to their adherents. And those mystery cults have mythological figures at the very center of them. And so, just using basic Bayesian, analysis and understanding, we can come to the conclusion that Jesus is a syncretism between Mediterranean mystery cults and Judaism, because of the fact that they were expecting a Messiah figure to come and rescue the Jewish people. When that person did not come, they had to figure out a different way in order to understand their religion. And so what they did was they scoured the Old Testament in order to figure out, like, why didn't Jesus come, or did he come, or what information can we know about Jesus. When they did that, they came up with Pesherim in order to explain this archangel figure that was going to save the Jewish people. And what they discovered was that, oh, he's come, he's died, because Satan crucified him in the lower parts of the celestial realm, and then he resurrected back up into the heavens, which is similar to what Jewish philosophers were saying about other figures in Judaism, like Moses. Philo of Alexandria believed that Moses was given a divine body and descended to the earth and accomplished a whole bunch of stuff, and then when he died, he resurrected, or not resurrected, but ascended all the way back up to the upper parts of the heaven. So these are not really kind of crazy ideas about it. This all is in line with what evidence that we have, and so this explanation is supported by mountains of evidence that has been collected, since 2014.
That's my fault, Andrew. I teed him up. That's on me. But I'm curious.
Sure.
I find that's
No,
interesting stuff.
that was a good
Do you want to
clarification because
respond to that?
yeah, yeah. I'm not trying to straw man in any way, okay? But basically, if Christians make things up and borrow elements from other religions, that doesn't prove that a man didn't exist. They couldn't create mythologies based on a human historical figure.
Well, okay, I can agree with that. I can agree with that. But my entire spiel there, what Seth asked me to do was to explain one, why I don't think that Jesus was a man, which entails the fact that the earliest references to Jesus are purely celestial references. Like they only figure him to be a celestial, figure that provides these very magical solutions to Jewish problems in the first century. So that's that explanation. But then also on my shoulders is the burden of proof, explaining all of the evidence that we have in Judaism and in the first century and in Christianity. And so that was what the Pesherim discussion was concerning Philo and the scouring of the Old Testament in order to generate stories about Jesus, and the Cohen's how Christianity is modeled off of mystery cults. So all of this is relevant to the position because you one have to explain the evidence that we currently have, but you also have to explain how your position could have come about given the evidence that we have.
Yeah, all of the earlier sources meet several historical criteria, like multiple attestation, embarrassment, dissimilarity, contextual credibility, and coherence. And even though
No,
the Gospels
no.
contain elements of mythology, they're mostly based on this planet Earth. So you're saying he's a celestial
I
figure.
don't think
Right.
Christianity has any of those things that you listed.
No, I'm sorry. We disagree on your premise there.
Okay. Well, there's multiple attestation.
No, there's not.
Attestation. Okay. Attestation by who?
Okay, Mark,
Nope.
the author of Mark, the author of
Nope.
the
Nope.
Q source. Yeah, those are different
Nope.
people writing about someone named Jesus
Q didn't
and what he
exist.
said.
Q doesn't exist, and that's a factual statement. Q does not exist, like the source. So for people that don't understand, Q is a fabricated source that is supposed by some scholars out there as a way to combat the not synaptic, synoptic problem. And the synoptic problem is the fact that the first three gospels that were written, they all coincide with each other. They seem to be copied off of one another in order to reconcile these things. They invented a source called the Q source, and everybody has a different idea of what's in the Q source. And the reason why everybody has a different idea about what's in the Q source is because we don't have the Q source in order to actually state what was in the Q source. So there's no way to know that Q was independent of any other Christian thought. There's also no way to know that Mark was independent of other Christian thought at the time, or that the author of Mark was truly an eyewitness or new eyewitnesses or anything like that. So please try again with multiple attestation.
Well, also too, I mean, Mark has two, if not three authors. None of the authors of any of the Gospels have ever been identified. They are written in the third person. We're talking about long generations after the supposed life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The events in the
Yeah.
Gospels not corroborated by any contemporary historian. So I reject this idea that it was an authority, any of these writings. So that's just a few of the reasons why we disagree with your premise, Andrew.
Well, I never said it was an eyewitness. I said that those are different sources that mention a figure named Jesus. Just because it was
Right,
40 years
and
after,
who what?
not prove that
But
Jesus didn't
so
exist.
in
I
historical,
can write a
so
book
so
a couple of generations later. It doesn't mean that the person didn't exist. I didn't say it was an
If
right,
eyewitness.
but
you
basic.
write several books generations later and you happen to have commonalities in your story, does that mean that that story is true?
No, but it also has differences that contradict each
Okay.
No,
other,
so
and so that gets to the criterion of
Go ahead, John. Go ahead,
dissimilarity and
John.
embarrassment.
no,
Yeah,
okay. So before we
that
get to criterion of similarity and embarrassment, I want to go back to this idea of Mark being independent of Q. Well, like we already said that Q is fabricated, so there's no way to know if that truly is independent. But also, I don't think that there's any way that you can truly show that Mark is independent of anything, or that Mark got his information independently, of the Christian movement at the time. What was the source for Mark's gospel? Can you tell me who the source was?
no, nobody can,
Right, exactly. How can you say that it's independent of anything if you don't know what the sources that were used are?
because it is a literary text written by an individual containing oral tradition from stories that were circulating at that time. and so it has to be written by
how
somebody,
is this
and we assume and
okay?
we know that somebody was a Christian.
Right. So
Yes or no?
how does this how does this tie us to history? How do we know, one, where this information came from, two, if this information is reliable, and three, that it wasn't fabricated?
Can you repeat the three again? The three questions.
Okay, so the three would be like, where did this information come from? Do we know that it's independent? And then how do we know it wasn't fabricated?
Where did it come from?
Right.
How do we know it wasn't fabricated?
Right.
And the second one?
Uh, like, I mean, at this point, I can't remember. Like, I listed them off twice. I mean,
Sorry, sorry. I just said
ultimately,
okay.
okay.
Okay,
So
where did it
ultimately,
come
what we
from?
need to
Let me
do,
just.
hold on. Ultimately, what we need to do is suss out between firsthand eyewitness testimony about Jesus and fabrication. Can you give us a good methodology for differentiating between historical fiction and Mark and historical fact?
Yeah, I just gave you several. But
No, you
so
didn't.
here's one. Okay, criterion of coherence.
Coherence. What do you mean? Criterion of coherence.
Certain facts about Jesus and other figures are established through other criteria. So it's established by
No,
this.
so you're basically piggybacking off of other criteria that also don't establish the existence of Jesus. Really? Can you name some of these underlying
Criterion of
criteria that you think?
Okay, contextual credibility. This states that it fits within the historical and cultural context of first century Palestine. There are many messianic figures
Okay, yeah.
claiming making similar statements that Jesus did, and so it's more
Right.
likely
So
that this was just a person that did that because many people did that. That's like saying, "Oh, he was a soldier in World War One that killed people." There were many soldiers in World War One that killed people.
right. But I mean, just because somebody has written something that seems to like to be placed in a certain time in history does not necessarily mean that it's historical. So that particular criteria is out the window. Do you want to try criterion of embarrassment? How about the Aramaic criteria? This whole idea that in like the Gospel of Mark and other Gospels, there are certain phrases that are better understood in Aramaic versus Greek, as well as Aramaic directly being integrated into the Gospel. Do you want to try that one?
No, because I'm not really familiar with it. So, but
Okay,
you
so
said
you're
where did it
telling
come
me that
from?
I know your position better than you do. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, no.
No.
I'm saying that you you need to provide evidence to the contrary. Because saying you don't know where it came from, the source
No.
Mark
I'm
doesn't
saying that
disprove that
your
Jesus didn't
criteria.
exist.
No. Hold on. I'm saying that your criteria doesn't actually prove the things that you think that they prove. I'm providing you with reasons why they don't actually prove it. So if you want to talk about like some of this other criteria that you're using to piggyback onto this criteria of coherence, I'm perfectly fine talking about it. But I can guarantee you're not going to have a fun time.
I'm having a fun time.
No, I'm saying you're not going to have a fun time if you start
Okay,
bringing up like the criteria of embarrassment.
okay. I brought up multiple attestation, and I've given you several examples. But
No. Yeah, so
you,
I responded. I said that it's not multiply attested, and the reason why it's not multiply attested is that we have an author that wrote Mark, and there were several authors also that contributed to Mark. But we have this author that we're calling Mark, the author of Mark. He got his information from elsewhere. We don't know where because there's no source information on it, which is distinctly different from other historical writings at the time, like historical biographies and everything like that. So we don't have Mark as independent attestation. Q doesn't exist, so that doesn't work. M doesn't exist. That's another fabricated source. That doesn't work. I don't know if you've heard about that one. L, that one also doesn't exist. We've had to fabricate information that is supposedly in L. So what we have is Mark being the seed for all the other gospels that exist. That includes Matthew, Luke, and John. John definitely knew the other gospels. So all we have are
May I
Paul's
respond to
epistles,
that?
and then we have, huh?
May I respond to that briefly?
Sure. So, just to recap here, to keep us on track, no multiple attestation. Mark is the first gospel written, and all other gospels copy from Mark, and there's no other attestation to the historical or the earthly tales of Jesus.
Okay. M and L, M and L contain material not found in Mark, not found in the Q sections, whether it exists or not, whether it existed or not. And so you're saying they're not independent. But if they're not from Mark,
I'm
why
saying
do
that
you
they
say
don't exist, so there's no way for us to determine independence.
they're not from Mark though, right?
No, I'm saying that M and L do not exist, and so they are therefore not independent because they do not exist. It's a lot like me saying that a mouse is independent of everything, but this mouse is also like, I don't know, played the Joker in the newest Joker movie. Like that mouse does not exist because that did not happen. The same thing with M and L. Those things, as far as we can tell, did not exist at any point in history.
That's a positive claim, and you need to provide evidence for that. You can say we
No.
don't
So
have
you
them,
complained about me
but we
saying
do have
absence of evidence is not
information
evidence of
given.
absence, right? My complaint is still the same. You're proclaiming that M&L do exist. You need to provide the evidence that they actually do exist instead of just providing claims that they do exist, which are claims that are made by scholars, admittedly, but they've had to fabricate these sources in order to solve the synoptic problem. But the fair error hypothesis, if you've ever heard of that, actually establishes that Mark is the seed gospel and that Matthew copied from Mark and then Luke copied from Matthew and Mark and then John. What this is outside the fair error hypothesis, but John actually had access at least to Luke, which if he had access to Luke, then he had access to the other gospels. So it seems to be like Mark is the seed gospel for all of the earthly tales of Jesus. So you have a single attestation to the earthly tales of Jesus.
Okay, we have evidence because it's literally in the gospel itself. We have material from Matthew.
Andrew, it's been a joy, and I appreciate your call very much. I mean, I've got goosebumps. I'm riveted by these arguments. John, do you care if we move on to our final caller? I mean, are you good with that?
No. I feel like Andrew's not listening to me, and he's just repeating things that he's read either off of Bart Ehrman's website or other author's website, and so he doesn't really have a really fleshed out idea of his own position. That is just how I feel about it.
The reason you feel he wasn't listening, I think, is because he wasn't listening. I just don't get multiple attestation. Okay, fine. What does that prove? And then I heard authoritative in there, and I tried to address that, and he skipped right over it. Well, someone explain authoritative to me. And beyond the rest of it, it became so not even esoteric, but just word salady. I thought maybe we should move on to our final call. I'm not sure I know how to pronounce this. XICO out of the UK. Hi, are you there? And how do I say your name?
Yes, hello. It's Chico. Like if it's a
Chico.
CH.
Wonderful. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind today?
Thank you. I called some time ago and spoke with Eve and Alyssa about this. I don't know if I made my point very clearly. They were very supportive, though. Let's see. My father died in July, and yes. So sorry, I forgot. First of all, I wanted to send solidarity and hugs to Gigi, because I think I'm going to speak about something that's similar to what she spoke, but I don't seem to be as brave or as strong as she is at this point.
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
You see, I come from a family of atheists. I grew up with my father and my grandparents, his parents. Both of my grandparents are atheists. My father was an atheist, and I grew up in between London and several places in Spain, where I was the only person amongst my friends that wasn't even baptized, which is very unusual. So I've come from a strong you can call it not believing in something, calling that a strong foundation. There was never any doubt in my mind. I do have religion around me. My mother's Catholic, but I've only seen her in church once in her life. She's never tried to educate me as a Catholic or make me a Catholic. She's always understood that I'm an atheist. And there are other religious people in my family, but I don't live anywhere near them, so I don't have that influence. But I have, and sorry, the last point of getting up to my point is that I've always, and my father as well, we've always been practicing atheists, is what he used to call it. So whenever I could, I would try to question religious dogma, especially in Spain, where it was the Catholic Church is incredibly strong. But in Britain, I would do it with Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, whoever really I could, but a lot less than in Spain. Now, I've found myself now since my father is dying, since my father died. So first, finding it very difficult to believe that I'm not going to see him again, and even I don't think I'm doubting. It's just I keep on fantasizing that I believe. If that makes sense. And what I am doubting is if all the times that I've tried to reason with with believers, for them not to believe, if I'm not helping to condemn them to this pain that I'm feeling now, I envy people who believe that they're going to see their loved ones when they die. You can't choose to believe, so it's not I can just choose now to change my mind. I'm still an atheist, but I'm finding that I'm not arguing with anyone. Of course I wouldn't. I'm not talking to anyone at the moment, really, other than you. And when I do, I don't think I'm going to put that much of an effort into it, because I would love to be able to be calm and know that I just have to wait. Sorry, I think I've made my point. I don't want to repeat myself.
No. You're doing great. Honestly, you speak to one of the great appeals of the idea of an afterlife, and I have a lot of empathy. It's funny. I never go in when somebody is and they're talking about, I can't wait to see my child again if they've lost a baby to cancer, or their spouse was killed in a car accident, or a beloved parent passes away, and they say one day. I don't I don't spend time trying to strip that away from them. Natalie and I talk, and she knows I'm a hard atheist, and I don't believe that there's an afterlife. But we always say, if there's something out there, honey, if there is a place out there that is beyond us, I'll find you. Wherever you are, you come find me. Wherever I am, I'll come find you. And we have those conversations. And I think there's a real comfort. We're good at meaning making and creating the stories that help us cope. Self-medicating is kind of a way to put that. And I don't begrudge anybody who comforts themselves with the idea of meeting someone somewhere someday. I have my issues with theistic notions of heaven and hell, etc. But when you think about your father in that way, and you think, well, one day, if there is life beyond, maybe we'll encounter each other in some way. I don't really see the harm in that. I don't begrudge anybody that. I think it's totally understandable. I don't know, John, did you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I really feel bad for your loss. I understand like going through that kind of loss. I've had loss in my life too, and so like even after I've become an atheist, so I understand like your pain there. Um, but
Thank you.
yeah, and I would just as far as processing that loss, I can't really I can't really advise you on the best way to do it because I know that it's very specific to everybody. I would recommend the Secular Therapy Project, and that's from the Recovering from Religion Foundation. They have their own link, seculartherapy.org, I believe it is, but there's also recoveringfromreligion.org that can, kind of help you process this. But typically, how I think of things, like thinking about how, not seeing your loved one after they pass, um, I kind of hold on to the fact that, after somebody passes, after they die, um, they can live on through my memories. Like I remember them, I remember them fondly. I think about the good times that I had with that person, and and in that way their memory lives on. And so that's not exactly the afterlife that's been sold by like Christianity or anything like that, but I think that that's the best kind of afterlife that we can hope for, is the effect that we have on other people. And so I try to have a decently good effect on other people in my interactions. I don't always, do that. Like I'm human. I don't always, have good interactions with other people on all topics. But, I know enough that I've positively affected a lot of people's lives. I've positively contributed to the betterment of their lives. And that right there, the fact that I played that role in their life, I know that after I'm gone, I know that I'll at least have some kind of effect on this world for a little bit. Um, I think that it's a rather extraordinary thing that people have such a prolonged effect on this world, as we see so many, famous people have had such a prolonged effect. But I think that doing the best you can to positively affect those that are in your life and to be a meaningful um, contribution to their lives to where they remember you after you're gone. I think that's the best that we can hope for. And as long as you have that in your heart, like metaphorical heart, obviously, as long as you have that in your heart, I feel like they are going to live as long as at least you do. And, if you tell other people about that person, then, they can carry on in that kind of way. So I think that keeping their memory alive and remembering the person that they were, I think that's the best thing that you can do and the best way to cope, at least for me, for those that I've lost in my life.
Hey, Chico, let me pass you on to another website. It's called Grief Beyond Belief. It's a great support mechanism for people who have lost someone, who don't necessarily hold to religious ideas of an afterlife or whatever. It's a wonderful place to go. And then after we finish this call, I'm going to read you something that might encourage you. Would that be okay?
Yes, that is fine. Yeah.
All right, wonderful.
I'm just
Well, you're
writing down
much
the
appreciated.
brief.
I'm sorry for the loss of your father, but honestly, I think we're all doing the best we can. And if there is an afterlife, hey, let's say we'll all get together and well, it'll be a party. Okay,
Yes,
we'll
yeah.
figure that out when we get there. Okay, brother.
Unless you're running out of time, do you mind if I make a point? Another point?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I found I found that the difference in my call between today and when I called Eve and Alyssa was that then I focused on calling to talk about how I believe that religious trauma had been affecting me. That even though I've never been brought up a religious person, the religious education that have been surrounded by in Anglican Britain or in Catholic Spain has permeated, and now I'm doubting things that I've never doubted in my life. Now I'm seeing it the other way. I mean, the point that you were making about the leaving something behind and changing, I think that's one of the things I'm feeling. I'm feeling a bit guilty that if I would have taken a crutch away from someone, that not too guilty, but I'll just tell you a bit more personal information. My elder sister is very religious, and she grew up in a different country than I had, and she had a slightly different upbringing. And she is very close to my mother, as I am, and my other sister. But I just know that when my mother dies, my elder sister needs that crutch. If she didn't have that crutch, I don't know how she would get through it. If she felt what I felt, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm just saying I don't, more than not knowing how to handle this. Luckily, as I said in my last call, in Britain we have the National Health Service, so I've got mental health treatment, and I'm receiving it. But still, the job the work that I used to do, and which is the work that you two are doing. Of course, you do it a lot better than I ever did. I don't have all the details at the fingertips you two seem to, but I don't know if it's the right thing, because neither you in the US or me in Britain, we don't have a society that can replace that crutch that religion gives. At least I'm not experiencing it. I don't have a religious community around me. I don't have the belief. I don't have, well, those two things are huge already, but the alienation that exists for normal working class people in capitalism, we need I think sometimes we need some sort of opium, and we don't have opium to the people. We don't have that. If we remove the crutch of religion, not that we're being very successful, but if we remove the crutch of religion, we haven't substituted it for anything else. And that's
Well, I'd like to
that's
speak
what
to
I find
this, if I
myself
may,
thinking a lot.
Chico.
Yeah.
If I
Thank
may,
you.
we're getting ready to draw to a close, and I want to honor the clock with our producers and everything. But the word crutch, I understand how we're using it here. I'm not convinced there's anything really that religion gives us that we can provide for each other without spreading falsehoods, without spreading myths, without relying on the fantastic. And sometimes people who are locked on to the ideas of an afterlife are cheated because then they focus less on this life. There are some people who say that all of our problems will be solved in an afterlife, are cheated because then they are not as focused on trying to solve each other's problems in this life. So while we certainly understand the balm that the idea of a heaven or whatever brings to people, and I think we have to be compassionate about that, I think there may be a way to reframe life and death in a way where we say, okay, fine, maybe we don't live forever. Maybe we won't see them again, but seeing them in this life, having the precious moments that we had in this life, having the imprint of who they were on our life, on our circle, on who we are as a human being, etc., is a gift that can never be replaced. And I think those are just as precious, if not more so. So, do we need to tell ourselves stories to get by, to get along? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't think so. But I think much of it is we need to focus on living in the here and now, understanding that life is precious and the fact that it's temporary makes it even more precious. And that they live on in our hearts and in our minds and in our families and in generations and all those things. Part of your father lives on in you, and that's no small thing. Okay, Chico?
Yes, I understand.
All right, I'm going to read
Thank you.
something to finish the show. If you would, stay close to your computer because it's the thought I want to leave you with today. All right?
Before I go, I just want to say thank you to the people in the chat. They were very supportive last time I called in, and they have been this time as well. So thank you.
Good people. Thanks for calling. John, will you indulge me for 2 minutes while I read something?
Oh, definitely. I love listening to your voice.
Well, this has been floating around on the internet for a while, and a lot of people use it at memorial services. It is called the eulogy from a physicist. You want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid energies of the cosmos you gave as good as you got. And at one point, you'd hope that the physicist would step down from the pulpit and Walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell him that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their ways forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let her know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are her eyes, that those photons created within her constellations of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And the physicist will remind the congregation of how much all our energy is given off as heat. There may be a few fanning themselves with their programs, as he says it. And he will tell them that the warmth that flowed through you in life is still here, still part of all that we are, even as we who mourn continue the heat of our own lives. And you'll want the physicist to explain to those who loved you that they need not have faith. Indeed, they should not have faith. Let them know that they can measure, that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope your family will examine the evidence and satisfy themselves that the science is sound and that they'll be comforted to know your energy's still around. According to the law of the conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You are just less orderly. Eulogy from a physicist. You can find that almost anywhere online. I want to say a huge thank you out to Amargan for producing the show. Dragon screening the calls. Is it Calasia or Calasia? I want to make sure I get that name right. Calasia? And Monkey at Typewriter. Help me out on that one.
Calasia.
Calasia. Begging your pardon. And Monkey at Typewriter for modding. John, it's always good to hang out with you, my friend. Thanks for allowing me to play along, sit at the big kid table with you. A lot of fun.
No, thank you. I mean, I feel like I'm the kid sitting at the big kids table when I'm with you. So, I mean, I definitely appreciate every show that I have with you.
Okay, the After Dark program starts here at 7 o'clock. That's a hair over 2 hours. We're going to call it a day, call it a show. To everybody in the chat, to everybody who called the broadcast today, it has been a pleasure. And we'll see you back here on the line next time. I don't hear any music. There it is.
There we go. Bye, heathens. Make sure you stand up, use your voice, all that kind of good shit.